Hey everybody, welcome to Porn Free Millennial. This is your host, Mac. Long time no talk. It's been a while. I think the last time I recorded an actual podcast interview, I think was back in April, late April, when I was interviewing Sir Silverstar, episode 19. And yeah, it's been a hot minute. Just wanted to do some housekeeping before we start this wonderful podcast. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Number one, yeah, just been busy. Busy with life, traveling a little bit, and then just working on different ways to create content through writing, through video. A lot of content I'm creating through the platform X, formerly known as Twitter. So just been busy. So I apologize about that. I'm looking to get some more podcasts out because I think it's a great way to have discussions about this topic that's pretty important and that I think plagues a lot of us. So my goal is to get some more podcasts out. I'm aiming to do it more on a weekly basis. So stay tuned for that. I think number two, really quick, we just want to explain the podcast itself. So this podcast is actually recording from a basically a collaborative call with Dr. Gregory Boris on the platform X. So there's this thing called Spaces on X where basically you can have a topic, you go live, you can record it, and you can have co-hosts and different speakers. And it's really neat. It's kind of like a collaborative podcast. So the main speakers are going to be me, Dr. Gregory Boris, who I interviewed on episode 14. If you haven't checked that out, it's fantastic. Dr. Boris just really quickly is a professor of English and philosophy at the University of Arkansas at Monticello. And he has his PhD in English from Louisiana State University, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Super smart guy. It was really great talking with him. He loves Lord of the Rings, and I think a lot of those topics are going to really hit home for you, especially if you're a Lord of the Rings fan. It's going to probably magnify, the message, magnify the impact, hopefully. And I wanted to share that there was another person on this discussion that really added a ton of value. Her name is Nikki. She's typically my co-host. I've ran a few spaces before, not a ton, but she's typically my co-host and really helps just like manage who can speak and like adds flavor to the conversation. And I knew that Nikki loved Lord of the Rings, but the one thing that I didn't know is just how knowledgeable she was about Lord of the Rings. So I think you're really going to enjoy that. Uh, Number three for housekeeping, there were a few little technical difficulties. Sometimes when you host spaces like on your laptop and people on their phones, sometimes there's issues. I think they're still working on it with the platform of making it cleaner. But there were points in time like where people dropped off as speakers, had to hop back on. It wasn't like too big of a deal, but just wanted to share that going in. There's a little bit of profanity here and there, nothing crazy, but it was a casual conversation. So just wanted to also, make a point of that. And then there was some deep conversation. Some people shared some like personal things, and I made sure with them it was okay for me to share on the podcast, and they said it was okay. Uh, and I think just like last housekeeping item. So alongside the podcast, I also write on Substack. You can find me there at Porn Free Millennial. And I also have another Substack called Max Musings, which is more of just like creative things that I like to write about, like poems, short stories. That probably more just has to do with like my travels in my RV. Definitely check that out. I'm also on Medium, which is another publication under Max Musings. And then I am opening up some slots for one on one coaching. So if you are interested in that, I do have a link in the show notes. If you know anybody that needs to build some momentum, needs some encouragement in their lives, I'm more than happy to help. So I'm opening up some room for that. If you're a paid subscriber to my Substack, or buy me a coffee, which is a site I just set up, you get a discount, or whoever it is gets a discount on that coaching. So I just wanted to put that out there before the podcast starts. And just wanted to say thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting. I was looking back at just, the past year, and it's just been an amazing ride. I've learned so much, and I'm going to keep learning and keep improving so that I can deliver some top grade quality content for you guys. So with that being said, no more talking from me. Let's get on with the podcast, because I'm sure that you're just chomping at the bit to hear about Lord of the Rings and how it applies to conquering challenges. With that being said, enjoy, keep fighting the good fight. Thank you. Bye. Dr. Boris, you there?
I am here. Welcome, everybody.
Cool. Well, we can go ahead and get started here. I'm sure people will kind of hop on as we go. But everyone, thank you for hopping on. The topic of tonight is From Hobbits to Heroes, talking Lord of the Rings and conquering challenges with our English professor, Dr. Gregory Boris. Dr. Boris, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking me to participate in this. This is a lifelong love of mine since I finally learned to read in the fourth grade. My mom, no, I mean, I had an aphasia when I was born. I was premature.
Okay.
I had some language problems when I was a kid that were never diagnosed. But my mom gave me a copy of The Hobbit when I was in the fifth grade.
Okay.
And I did not stop reading Tolkien over and over again from that point on through going to college. And
wow.
So it's been a long time since I dipped back into it. I dipped back into it when the movies came out.
Sure.
But it absolutely captured me, and especially the Lord of the Rings and then the Silmarillion. And so I'm humbled that you would ask me to participate in these spaces to talk about one of my very first love in literature.
Sure.
So thank you.
Yeah, what a great way to start, and I think keep that thought written down. You got your pen. I'd love for you to explain more about that, because I think that's going to resonate a lot with the topic today is overcoming challenges and conquering them, and how Lord of the Rings ties into that. Such a great narrative. Before I go over what we're going to talk about today, we're going to have a few kind of topics that Dr. Boris and I are going to discuss, and then what we'll do is kind of as we're kind of tail ending one of the topics, we'll open it up for people listening to ask questions or to give feedback, and we'll kind of do that throughout. I'm also recording this. I have a podcast called Porn Free Millennial. I plan to put this in as one of the episodes. So just a heads up there. I'm looking to put this on my Spotify and my Apple because it's something that's meaningful to me. I before we get started, I just wanted to share, at least for me, why this topic came up in my head was, I went through a really challenging last year. I had a 5-year marriage that ended. I went through a really tough divorce. I didn't feel really mentally stable. Felt like a lot of things were just falling apart for me. And during that time, there were some dark days, and I found so much inspiration in rereading and rewatching The Lord of the Rings. It's always my go-to. I remember I had times in my life before, anytime there's like a really serious thing coming up, like I remember I had my first knee surgery when I was in high school, and I was kind of nervous about going under the knife. And I remember watching The Return of the King before that. I remember before I got married, I think I watched Return of the King before that. And I definitely rewatched and reread all of them when I was going through my divorce. And it really helped me out. To go with like the meme, the famous meme out there that do men think about Rome every day? I think about Lord of the Rings every day. That's kind of my Rome. Even if I wasn't like watching Lord of the Rings or reading it, Lord of the Rings to me just has a very special place in my heart. The story, the characters, their journeys, they help me feel like a hero again. And I found a lot of hope and strength in the characters' resilience and just the overall storyline. So today it's a big treat for me. So really appreciate you being on again, Dr. Boris. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about like Tolkien a little bit to start with, if you want to go there first, Dr. Boris, and talk a little bit about maybe some real life things that were going on at the time, or kind of how some of the themes tied into like Tolkien's world, and how maybe he overcame some challenges. That's going to be like the first section topic, and we might talk a little bit more about, um, like your first time getting to meet Tolkien and his work through reading, and maybe we could talk about that a little bit within the first section because I think that's really cool. The second section we're going to talk about is basically like the characters in the book, the actual like in the characters in the movie, at a high level, just so anyone listening can understand. But really, just talking about like, the overall themes, the overarching character arcs that are so inspiring. And then the third section, we're going to talk about how, like, what characters do we like relate to the most? Like, what character do I relate to the most? What character, Dr. Boris, do you relate to or that inspires you? Nikki, Alex, Paul. That's things that we want to kind of talk about to end. Because I hope, hopefully, by the end of this, like you listening to this, you feel a little bit more encouraged, and like whatever challenge there is in your life, it doesn't have to be like something crazy, but whatever challenge is kind of holding you down, kind of like that ring of power on your neck, just pulling all your energy away and sapping it. What's something in your life, that you can tackle when you're done listening?
I
So that's kind of the goal of the podcast.
I looked up some quotes from the movies. Even the smallest person can change the course of the future.
Such a beautiful line. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that, man. And so just to start off with, Dr. Boris, you just want to kind of start us off in the conversation, and we can kind of just go back and forth from there.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. Thanks again, everybody who's here. I don't know what your experiences are, so I'll just start with my own experience.
Sure.
I had a wicked difficult time learning to read. In fact, I was so stupidly smart when I was in the first grade that I faked my first grade teacher into thinking that I was an expert reader, and I skipped the second grade.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and then it took that teacher about 6 weeks to figure out that I didn't even recognize the letters of the alphabet. And it later on, we kind of figured out, like, every time I was supposed to stand up and read something that I'd written in the class, I would get a bloody nose, like so often that my mom had to send 5 extra shirts to school for me. And so then I got plunked back down into the second grade, and I struggled, and we moved from Michigan to Kentucky, where I actually grew up. And it didn't click with me until the fourth grade, but it did finally click. And then, like I said, in the fifth grade for Christmas, my mom gave me a copy of The Hobbit, and I read it, and I was mesmerized. And from then on, sixth through 12th grade, I bought every Tolkien. This is after there was a renaissance of Tolkien fandom that happened in the 1970s. So I was right in there. They were like, I don't know if you guys know this, but like graffiti started popping up. There had been graffiti in World War II that said Frodo was here. So Tolkien had already inspired an entire generation by the time, very early on. But then Tolkien had kind of gone quiet. And then in the 1970s, it came roaring back. And it was kind of, I think it was partly because of the trauma of the end of the 60s,
Mm.
Vietnam, the sexual revolution, that people started to crave some kind of solid foundation for values that I think that Tolkien's mythology answered for them.
Mm.
And so for me, kind of a just personal thing. I thought, I kept I reread the Lord of the Rings 10 times. I got the Silmarillion. I got the Unfinished Tales. I actually have a copy in my household right now somewhere of a little children's book that Tolkien wrote that most people don't know about called Rover Random, which is about a
Mm.
dog. Um, and I thought in my own experience that by the time I got to the point, like, I was drawing pictures, I painted a mural on my wall in my bedroom in high school of the Lord of the Rings, like,
Wow.
the Mount Doom erupting. And my mom was kind enough to say, yeah, go ahead. You know what I mean? Go ahead and do it. I had a pet Black Widow spider.
No way.
And
You call it Shelob?
no, it was Ungoliant.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah. And I reversed the food chain because she got so big that I would feed her geckos.
Oh my gosh, dude! What kind
Yeah,
of
and
spider?
I only had to feed her about once a month. And the geckos down in South Texas are translucent, so like she would just drop down in the jar and just like
Oh my
nip them,
gosh,
and you could see the poison going through their body. It was, uh,
that's very Ungoliant like.
yeah. But so yeah, I was a weirdo. I was a dork. My PhD in the future was already guaranteed. But one of the interesting things that I discovered after I sort of exhausted my Tolkien fascination was that I kind of concluded that I must like fantasy literature,
Hmm.
and I hate fantasy literature absolutely. And because after Tolkien, I said, well, let me try somebody else. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I picked up a book. I'm not going to mention the title because it's very popular, and I think it's also become a series somewhere on streaming. And I remember reading it, and I got to page like 13, and I said to myself, if this guy uses the word orb to describe something circular one more time, I'm throwing this book across. And he did the next page,
Can I
and I was
guess the
like,
author?
yeah,
Robert
I
Jordan.
I don't, yeah, I don't. Oh, maybe so. But anyway,
Was J.K. Rowling?
no, it was not J.K. Rowling. I'm too old for that. And she's got supreme talent. Not like Tolkien, but I give her props because my kids grew up, reading that, and I was happy that they did. But what I discovered when I got to college, and I want to recommend this to you guys, is that I didn't love fantasy literature. I loved a deep mythology, which Tolkien actually created. And until I read Faulkner, I did not meet another author that was able to create such a convincing alternate fictional history,
Hmm.
that Tolkien had done. And so, and Tolkien for me was morally extraordinarily formative, which I think Colorado is something that we want to key on tonight. Like, how is it that Tolkien offered us in his mythology a sort of mirror
Hmm.
for the challenges that we face, for the challenges that we worry about in the world of human beings every
Right.
day, even now, that gives us this solid grounding in the idea that human beings are salvageable,
Right.
they are valuable, they are they are worth, you know, not only mercy, but they're also worth justice, which I think are all themes that run throughout everything that Tolkien wrote. He had a deep love. I know he said that he wished he could have been a hobbit,
Right.
um, but to me, the hobbits represent that core, plain dignity that God has invested in His creation, and they're a reminder, um, of what we are,
Right.
um, at the very base. And so for me, it's huge in his books. It's not just a matter of watching the perversions of vice. It's also being reminded of the plain, heroic characteristics that we all actually possess as human beings. And so for me, that's why
Hmm.
it's so important.
Yeah, and just to kind of touch on that, that was beautifully said. Um, I think sometimes the criticism that I hear about Lord of the Rings is it's too simplistic. There's kind of good and evil, almost like it's like a bad thing, right? And maybe that's kind of where we are in this like state in this current society that we're in, this way of thinking, is that you know it's more complicated than that. Kind of like Game of Thrones, if you're to compare them. Like, people are more like Game of Thrones than they are in Lord of the Rings. But I think the beauty of Lord of the Rings is that it's something to strive towards. Like, can I be more like Aragorn today? Can I be more like Samwise the Brave? Can I do the right thing? I think that's something important. I think that I've held on to. What do you think about that? I think that's kind of what you were saying in a way. That's what resonated with me.
Well, I think it's also, I think you've expressed it beautifully. It's not just a matter of asking yourself the question, um, can I be Aragorn today? Or
Hmm.
can I be Samwise? Um, I think the question more philosophically is, can I embrace those qualities that I've been invested in, which are the good, that
Right.
actually are the qualities that explain all the evil that I face in the world? Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, I think that does make sense to me. A lot. It's
Like one of the
yeah.
things that I learned from Tolkien was that, and also Saint Augustine. Augustine, when he finally converted to Christianity and answered Saint Monica's prayers, his mother, he had a moment of lucidity where he realized that he'd been asking the question in the wrong direction. He had done what we all do during the conversion process and asked, if God is all good and all powerful and all knowing, then why is there evil in the world? And
Mm,
one day he had an epiphany and realized that the question wasn't, why is there evil? The question is, why is there good?
mm,
And he realized that he'd been looking through the telescope in the wrong direction, meaning that he was trying to explain good through the lens of evil. And you hear this all the time. People say, oh, I think evil exists because without evil, there couldn't be good. You've got it entirely upside down. And that's what Augustine realized. Oh, if I look through the telescope from a God point of view, from good, then evil is absolutely explainable, because
mm,
the existence of evil in the world means we have free will. And the monumental truth that this leads you to is that your choosing the good is not coerced, it's free. And that to me is what Tolkien at bottom had as one of his core understandings of reality. And it was very helpful to me, and has been one of the one of the pillars of my mooring. Not that I'm a perfect person, I'm not. I struggle just like every one of you do, with temptations, with will to power, with all of those things. But Tolkien has remained for me in my adult life as a reminder
mm,
that I am not all that in a bag of chips. I know I come across that way on X. I get it. That's my character. But that I am good, and
right.
that I was made for a reason. And the reason is not to either ignore or to neglect the gifts that I've been given, if that makes sense. And I think that the Lord of the Rings walks us through a whole bunch of different characters that have to come to terms with what their virtue is, and what dangers lie in front of them because of their virtues.
Right.
Because vices really are just perversions of virtues.
Mm,
Virtues are not anti vices. Virtues exist alone and on their own. Vices rely upon virtues to exist, and they are
makes sense.
always either a vice is a privation of a good, or it is the perversion of a good. It can
Mm,
be no other thing. And so I think the Lord of the Rings gives us a beautiful story and a beautiful myth where multiple characters get to confront their own um, their own roles in this huge story. Um, anyway, I'll drop off there, Mac, and let you.
oh, beautiful. Yeah, I thought we could stop here maybe and open it up to the listeners. Uh, and I think maybe if you guys want to speak, go ahead and put a request in. Nikki's our amazing, wonderful co-host today. It's moderating. They'll help out. But maybe when we're waiting, if Alex and Seth, if you want to hop in, Nikki, maybe do you remember the first time that you were introduced to Lord of the Rings, and maybe if you could go over a little bit of how it meant to you, I think that'd be pretty neat.
Hey, let me jump in here. Nikki
Sure.
is something of an expert too.
Oh wow, I know she loves Lord of the Rings. Now,
Yeah. So
expert, I'm. Hey, I
I,
just, I just, it's like I found $20 in my pocket. I'm
yeah,
just happy as a clam right now. So that's
yeah.
awesome.
It's Tolkien Laundry Day, so we're very, very, very.
Nikki's like, you don't know how excited I've been the whole week now.
You have no idea.
Love it.
Yeah,
Be-
I am trying to bring you up, Alex. So if you'll do me a favor, I'm going to ask you to drop your request for me and let me send you a request and see if that works. Okay? Can you do that, please?
Awesome. So
Thank
Nikki,
you.
yeah, while we're waiting, any remarks so far on what you heard and maybe your first experience of Lord of the Rings that stuck with you?
Well, I'll tell you honestly, and I know Dr. Gregory is going to at this, but that's okay.
Hello.
A complete, just a minute, Alexander, and we'll bring you in, okay? Awesome guy. Um, he's, I love Tolkien, but my very first fantasy introduction was C.S. Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely fell in love with his 7 books, The Chronicles of Narnia. Those were just my aha moment for fantasy kind of thing, and what drew me into the fantasy world. And then when I got into high school, I was that nerdy girl that was in the library, and I read all different kinds of books. Any kind of book I could get my fingers on, I'd read. And one of the other nerdy guys said, "Have you read Lord of the Rings?" I'm like, "What? What's Lord of the Rings?" And he handed me the Fellowship of the Ring, and I read it, and I went, "Holy crap! I have reached nirvana." You know? So it was for me a experience of immersion. I don't know if that makes sense or not,
Oh, it
but
does.
because of the hell that I had went through in high school and just wanting to run away from things, I was able to immerse myself into the books, and I started just rereading them to the point where almost every year I read all 3 of them over and over, at least once a year. And that's just how I am. And I absolutely love them. There's certain areas that I'll go, okay, I know what goes on in there, and I just skip over it and go to my
You're
favorite
gonna
part.
sing again.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I just skip that part. But
Hey,
I've always tried to figure out what character I wanted to be. And, most girls go towards Arwen and want to be Arwen and stuff. But I was talking to Dr. Gregory many moons back, and he kind of explained to me that, maybe you might look at Eowyn.
That's
And,
awesome.
and I looked at Eowyn, and I went back and I looked through her character, and I went, holy shit, the man nailed me. And I'm not happy about that. But it is the
Hey, you
truth,
get 2 choices. It's either Arwen or Eowyn. Who are you gonna
Well, you know
pick?
what? At one point in my life, I went, I'll be happy to be Rosie.
Hey,
You
you know what? Sorry, Rosie. Totally left Rosie out. Rosie's
know,
awesome.
well, you have to think about it. Rosie actually did play a part, even though it was a small part. She stayed behind. She was behind, but she was also helping with what was going on in the Shire while all the shit was going down in Mordor and stuff.
She's holding it
She
down.
was, yeah, she was back in the Shire holding down the fort for the
Oh
guys.
yeah, you're right. When Saruman came back, she was
Yeah, when
probably.
Saruman, yeah,
Oh
well,
man.
Saruman came back and she was in there with helping out and stuff.
yeah, and
So,
Rosie is the reason for a Galadriel or an Arwen or
Oh,
an
there's
Eowyn.
Galadriel. Yeah.
yeah.
She's a reason
There.
for those characters. So when you look
Yeah.
at the development of the arc of the story for all of these extraordinary characters, you have to recall that the whole reason for all of this, which they don't understand at the very beginning, is to save the hobbits. That's the
Mm.
point.
Exactly.
And,
Exactly.
and Rosie is extraordinarily important because she's one of those characters, and this is why she doesn't get developed as much as other characters, maybe to the disappointment of certain people, but she doesn't need to be fixed.
Great point.
Does that make sense?
Oh, I love
And
it, man.
and until the great characters in the story discover that that's what the cause is, I don't think they can achieve the greatness that they actually have the gifts to achieve.
I love it.
If
Also,
that makes sense.
yeah, and just to give Rosie her roses, from my point of view, is I think throughout the books, throughout the movie, Samwise is thinking about Rosie. He's thinking about her. He's wanting to do his best and to put out his best performance, his existence, so that he can be with Rosie. And what does he do when he gets back to the Shire? After victory, he marries her. And I think that's pretty freaking cool too. The character of Rosie and all these women
Well,
in Lord of the Rings, really.
one of the things about Sam is that he in the books he has a crush on Rosie and stuff. Even in the books, she's kind of in there a little bit in the beginning, and he's actually trying to protect her in some ways, even in the beginning, whenever she goes to her uncle's, I believe it is, and she goes over there, and he's like, stay over there with them so that she can be safe when the Black Riders come through. So there's some really cool stuff that you have to pick up. And if you read, you can read the books 100 million times and you're going to find something new each time.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's getting me fired up just to read them again, watch them again, because you're so right, Nikki. That's beautiful that you said that. It is pretty cool. I've never thought about Rosie like that before, and it's cool that
Is
we're able
someone
to
speaking? I can't hear them.
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay, Colorado, if you're talking, I don't think I can hear you.
Okay. What do I do? 1 second.
All right, I'm going to drop myself down and you can bring me back up, okay?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. Yeah, okay, so I was just saying that this is so cool because I've never thought about it that way, to where we have Rosie. And again, I think this is part of the reason for the podcast, while we're talking like from Hobbits to heroes, is Rosie is a hero in her own right. We all are. And sometimes it takes something like this to realize it, potentially, or you just realize it at some place in your life. But for me, the story of Lord of the Rings has really captivated me as well, Dr. Boris. And you feel like that when you're done. Like, you're like, hey, like, if I can embrace these qualities, these virtues, I can be a hero too. Wanted to give some other folks a chance to speak. So I know Alex, you were here first. Any feedback so far? Anything you've been chewing on?
Hey, thanks a lot. It's glad to be here. Everybody can hear me loud and clear.
Hey,
Yeah, a little bit distant. Maybe scoot up a little bit.
A little bit distant. I've got my mic right in front of my mouth, so that's good.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. I want to thank you for hosting this space. I'm a really big, huge fan of Tolkien. I can relate with Nikki as well. When I was in my childhood, I was reading it, and I was kind of the distant guy that didn't want to socialize that much and just wanted to escape into the literature and really have a fun time with it. And one great point that Dr. Bors mentioned was how Augustine had that revelation of looking at the question in another way. And it reminded me of how the creation of Arda went with Iluvatar, creating the Ainur to curate an orchestra, music, a symphony, and how in the background there was a discord, and it was Melkor that was the strongest one and the rebellious one that was created by Eru, Iluvatar, and showing that world is evil at nature, and that there was a attempt to bring good with some, at least some symphony with the music of creation. And it was a great point, and it really resonated with me, and bringing this up because it's really like the origin story of the world of Arda to like the importance of music in the whole series and the whole music and the whole mythology in general.
That's
I don't know what you guys think about this point.
that's an excellent point. Can I chime in?
Go
Man,
ahead.
you just threw us right into the weeds here, man. I appreciate it. The, the
Yes.
the way I read that when I was younger, um, the way I read it was that the no matter the amount of discord, because you remember the way Tolkien describes it in the Silmarillion is that Melkor was constantly frustrated that no matter how much discord he tried to introduce to the melody and the beautiful symphony of creation, God would then sort of weave that discord back into the original piece, and it would fit. And that was absolutely against everything that he was trying to do. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
So that in itself was an inspiration to me, the actual forgiveness that is held out to us for our own shortcomings and the discord that we create, is always available, because no matter how bad we try to screw things up, we can't. And I'm a big Moby Dick fan too. When I read Moby Dick, I was like, oh, you know,
Right.
it's a Melville gets that too. No matter how much you try to dash the creator's plan, um, failure for you is guaranteed. Which I think we will weave back later in the conversation to some of the things that Mac wants to talk about.
Yeah, sure. That's great. Wanted to pass it on to old grouchy guy. How's it going, sir?
I'm actually doing pretty good tonight. I'm a little late to the conversation. I had to go and do a few things before I got on here, and I don't know where we are in the conversation, but I just wanted to put in that my introduction to the Lord of the Rings was the Rankin Bass cartoons of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, which was a theatrical release, and then finally the Return of the King a little bit later, and that brought me into the books. And of course I bought all the books, and I don't know, I have dozens of books now, keeping in mind that the Silmarillion was released after the death of J.R.R. Tolkien, by his son, and had a few edits and stuff like that that didn't really fit with his original vision of what the Lord of the Rings was and the mythology behind it. It was kind of based upon some notes that he had in his past, but some of the things that the Amazon series have been doing for the Lord of the Rings haven't really been keeping up with what his mythology was. So that's one of the things that I kind of want to look at maybe a little bit, and keeping in mind that at the same time that J.R.R. Tolkien was writing his Lord of the Rings, C.S. Lewis was writing his um, Chronicles of Narnia at the same time. And J.R.R. Tolkien thought that it was just a little bit too not, how should I put it? It wasn't symbolic enough about that. And they had some disagreements between them about how it should be portrayed, with the lion, the lion and the wardrobe and stuff like that, as compared to how the Lord of the Rings was. So I don't know really what you think about that.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing, man. Appreciate your passion for it. We're actually I know you said you came a little late. We kind of had a little bit of a structure to what we'll talk about, but totally fine with you sharing that. We'll probably shelve like that actual conversation maybe for a later one. I'm sure Dr. Boris and Nikki, you guys could talk for days about that. That might be at different spaces. Uh, but thanks for sharing. I couldn't help but realize while we were talking, and this is just a very quick off ramp. It's still related, but everyone's kind of sharing how they were introduced to it. And I was actually introduced to it in the movie theaters. So like I grew up, like I read The Hobbit and stuff, going through grade school, but I was like more into like The Mummy, which is hilarious, like the Mummy movie with Brendan Fraser. And I remember this is what I remember. I remember seeing it with one of my best friends, The Mummy, and then it was like a few weeks later or something, or some kind of recent amount of time, like it wasn't too much time passed, and Lord of the Rings came out, and I didn't really know much about it. Like I knew it was like related to kind of the Hobbit, but I just didn't really know. And boy, that first movie just knocked my socks off. But I did remember like one part of it that was hilarious that I remember, when the goblins are all climbing up the walls in, before the Bridge of Khazad-dûm in the Halls of Durin, I believe. uh I was like, oh, they're totally copying like the Mummy, because in the Mummy, like the Mummy has like these hordes of like resurrected mummies, and they like climb up the walls. And I just remember that as a kid, and I look back in so much shame. So I'm kind of telling myself, because like I just felt a little bit like, wow, dude, like you didn't think like he maybe wrote that in the book. And that's what I remember my best friend's mom saying, who loved Lord of the Rings. She's like, dude, like you're fine, like the Mummy's good, but and then I think that kind of like changed my whole opinion about it. I was like, oh, like this is actually like a well established thing. And again, I was like a little kid. But then I just remember really getting to Lord of the Rings through video games. So there were video games that were put out. The ones that really stood out to me were the Two Towers and the Return of the King on PlayStation 2. And I just remember that was such a cool experience for me, because you kind of felt like you were the character and you played as your favorite character. My favorite character was Aragorn, of course. I remember John was Legolas and Matt was Gimli. Like, that's just kind of how it worked. Like you kind of picked like who you related to the most, and maybe whose virtues you're trying to pursue, right? And I just remembered, and I just wanted to throw that in there because we kind of had the books, the animated films, the films, and the video games for me was something that really like captivated me, to where I was like, oh wow, like I'm playing a video game and I get to be Aragorn, or I get to be Legolas, I get to be Gimli, and I get to fight these bad guys. Like this is pretty cool. So that's kind of how it got like really, I got really hooked on Lord of the Rings, I think through the video games. Like that got me really like excited about it. And then all its history after that, really. So and I think everyone was able to share that to speaker, kind of how they got introduced to Lord of the Rings. I think next, Dr. Boris and Nick, if you want to remove people as speaker for now, we'll add you guys back up when we kind of have our next round. What's that?
You have to bring me up to
Oh, my bad.
co-host.
I've been avoiding that duty. I'm sorry. I'm trying to. I
No,
want to make
that's
sure that
okay.
I feel like the button for it. I don't know where the button is. Do I click on you?
Yeah, you can click on me and on my little icon, and it should, tell you if you want to invite me to
Okay,
co-host.
let me see.
While he's doing that, I'll tell you guys an anecdote. So I was a Catholic school principal, a PhD candidate, and a bartender all at the same time, and three identities couldn't meet. And this does actually relate to Tolkien. And I was working one night in the bar, and we had a kid in our bar. Like everybody looked like me because they had a look, except for one. And Enoch was our one. He was our Matthew McConaughey. He was the guy that when hostesses would get hired, they'd be like, "Who's that?" And the girls would all tell him in the back of the restaurant, like, "Stay away from him. He's a dog." He was a good kid. And one night, Britney Spears walked into the restaurant, and he didn't believe me that it was Britney Spears, but it was. And he said, "Hey, man, I know you're married, um, but you can't tell me, because I don't know if you guys know anything about Baton Rouge, but Baton Rouge has an inordinate number of extraordinarily beautiful women in it. It's ridiculous. And there's something in the water down there. But anyway, he said, I know you're married and you're a good guy, but you can't tell me that you don't like look at that when they walk in." And I said, "No, I don't. I don't." And he said, "Why? Is it because you're married?" And I said, "No, marriage doesn't do that." And he said, "What is it?" And I said, "There are two things." I said, "One, I have daughters, and that changes or should change the way that a man looks at women. And secondly, I know something that you don't know." And he said, "What?" And I said, my boys can swim. Because at the time I had 4 children. And he looked at me for a minute because he didn't realize what I was saying. But the joke in my family is I could impregnate, my bride from across an Olympic pool. My boys can swim. And I was like, you don't know if your boys can swim, so you got to spread them around. And he looked confused for a minute. And I was like, but this will dovetail later into our conversation about how this mythology informs, especially what it means to be a man. Because I know that female characters are kind of neglected in Tolkien's mythology. I think that's because they're kind of a mystery to men. I think he's respectful of them, but Nikki can probably say like the disappointing thing about the stories is that it's mostly men that have to do all this stuff, and the women end up being kind of backdrop or background characters. And I think that's an interesting thing for us to discuss. Why is that? Why would it be? The other thing I want to mention to you guys, speaking of C.S. Lewis, Nikki, is, I don't know if you guys know, but Tolkien was instrumental in converting Lewis from an atheist to an Anglican. Are you guys?
Yeah, he helped him become a Christian. Yeah.
And if you read the Inklings, so y'all, I hope you guys have your pens too. Write down the Inklings because it's a great biography of Owen Barfield, J.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, the influence of Charles Williams, the background influence of G.K. Chesterton on these guys while they were at Oxford and Cambridge. But the Owen Barfield and Tolkien went to visit with C.S. Lewis at his room at Oxford one night, and they were talking about Christianity. And Tolkien said to him, and this is from the Inklings, if I remember correctly. Tolkien said to him, he said, Clive Staple, and by the way, that's what CS stands for, Clive Staple. You love the dying and resurrecting God everywhere you meet him, except in Christianity, which is the only one that claims that the story is true. And that did it for C.S. Lewis. So, Nikki, I did not love C.S. Lewis at first, but I read all of his apologetics in college, and I came to love him. I came to adore the friendship that he and Tolkien had with each other. I firmly believe that if C.S. Lewis had not died prematurely, he would have converted to Catholicism for sure. Tolkien was a Catholic, and The Lord of the Rings, for those of you who don't know, is a thoroughly Catholic world. It's a sub-creation, but it's thoroughly Catholic. And I approve, because I'm thoroughly Catholic. But the thing I loved about C.S. Lewis later on, he became an inspiration for my first novel, and that's not the topic for tonight, so don't ask me about it. But he did a space trilogy, the third book of which is called That Hideous Strength, which is one of the greatest novels I've ever read. And it does speak to all of this stuff about like rising to challenges, figuring out where the dangers are, figuring out what evil is, figuring out what your virtues are and what your vices are. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
What was that one called?
I'm sorry.
And what were those novels called?
That Hideous Strength.
They're called
That Hideous Strength.
Yeah. No,
Oh,
he is.
excellent book.
They're
Yeah.
called Paralandra. Nikki, help me out here. Paralandra, Out of the Silent Planet, and
It's
That Hideous
the
Strength. Do I have them right?
Yeah, the first one is Out of the Silent Planet. The second one is Perilandra, and the third one is That Hideous Strength.
Okay.
Those 3 books, if you read only, seriously, That Hideous Strength, you will be reading about our times right now. C.S. Lewis was prophetic.
That's a great share.
100% true. C.S. Lewis predicted everything that we're going through now. And for those of you who are not familiar with his mythology, what he did is, you guys know we have planets that are named after Roman gods and Greek gods.
Right.
But those in in Lewis's mythology are angels.
Oh,
And
so there's
all
like
of the planets,
Gabriel and Michael.
yes, and all of the planets are ruled each by an angel, and guess which angel rules the earth?
Oh boy, I don't want to guess. I
You
think I
don't
know.
you don't have to guess.
I think I know.
No, it's the fallen angel.
Very
Ay,
easy.
ay, ay.
And then he dovetails it with Arthurian legend, because he and Tolkien both were very saddened by the fact that England did not have its own sub-created mythology, and they were both trying to
Interesting.
provide that with the Chronicles of Narnia. Now, you guys are right. Whoever said this, Tolkien was disappointed that Lewis was much more allegorical than Tolkien hated allegory, and so
Exactly. And they fought over it
yeah,
constantly.
he just thought it was too thin.
Just to clarify, so define allegory really quick. I didn't want to slow you down, but define allegory.
Well, allegory, if you read Dante, and I recommend that too, so get your pens out, and you read the letter to Con Grande from Dante explaining the Divine Comedy. And that's another one you got to put on your list. Guys, if you have my class, this is what I do in college. I ask my students, are you familiar with this? And when they look at me with puzzled looks on their face, I say, that's part of the Bourse list. Put it on your list. That's me telling you you need to know this. So when Dante wrote the Divine Comedy, which is the Inferno, the Purgatorio, and the Paradiso, somebody asked him, how am I supposed to read it? How am I supposed to understand it? And he said, and this is very, very famous, not anymore, but I know it. He said there are 4 levels of meaning in great literature. There's the literal level. There's the, poetic or the simile level. There's the allegorical level, and then there's the anagogical level. The fourth one, the anagogical, is the way you read it from God's point of view. But the other 3 are very, very human. And so Tolkien didn't like the allegorical because allegory is thinly disguised symbolism that is attached to the literal, and it kind of denigrates the literal. And I think because Tolkien was a Catholic, and we Catholics believe in transubstantiation and have a fundamentally different understanding of our incarnation than Protestants specifically, that he had a distaste for it. Does that make sense to you guys? Allegory is simply like, if you could write a morality play in the Middle Ages and just have a character stand in for lust or stand in for anger,
Right.
you know what I mean? Or stand in for one of the vices, that's allegory to Tolkien.
So it's kind of like Aslan is like Jesus. It's very on the nose.
Exactly. And so he was a little bit, to me, and my initial experience reading the Chronicles of Narnia is that they felt thin to me.
Right. There wasn't as much of a world.
Exactly. It felt thin to me. But I got to tell you, in the end, when I became more mature, I came to adore them because I understood the level at which C.S. Lewis was trying to pitch them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so that wasn't what Tolkien was doing. When Tolkien wrote The Hobbit, he really was writing a children's story, and he hadn't worked out his mythology yet. So if you go back and compare like The Hobbit to Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion, you begin to realize, oh, the spiders are singing in The Hobbit. Okay, he kind of abandoned that. You know what I mean? Like,
it's like, maybe we won't do that.
Maybe not. But he was writing to his children at that point.
Right.
Once he got into the Lord of the Rings, he's going full blown, and the Lord of the Rings is a sub creation. So, for those of you who are not as familiar, remember this: the Lord of the Rings happens at the end of the Third Age. We human beings who are in this spaces right now live in the Fourth Age. So what Tolkien did is he situated the Lord of the Rings and his 3 ages up to that point, first, second, and third, in between the creation and the fall from the garden and Moses. Okay?
Jeez. I love that.
Yeah, and it's the lost history of the world that happened in between the fall from the garden and Moses. And then the fourth age basically is the anticipation of the coming of Christ.
Got
So
it.
it's not an Middle Earth is Earth. Middle Earth is our world. Middle Earth, all of this is supposed to dovetail and relate to our history, our salvation history specifically, which to me makes it heads and shoulders above other mythologies that have been created.
And does it tell me if this concept does not make sense? But when you were saying that, I almost thought about, kind of destroying the ring was like destroying death itself, and that's what Christ did on the cross, was defied death. Any ties there? I mean, it kind of that's what was speaking to me while you were talking. But this impossible task is actually defeated. Dropped into the fires of from where it came, death. Which is basically the Garden of Eden, eating the forbidden apple, right? Was what marches with death. Anything on that, Dr. Boris?
That's really an interesting question. If I heard you right, you said that what is intriguing is the attempt to defeat death.
Well, if you think about, you're kind of talking about how, in some ways we're anticipating Christ to come back to earth. And to me, it almost seems like destroying the ring, like kind of bringing down Sauron, was like potentially Christ, the death of death, because when Christ died, it defeated, we defeated death, so to speak.
Okay.
And obviously we
Wow.
still gotta live, the ring's destroyed, Sauron's gone. There's still gonna be things that are messy, right, in this world. But
Okay, so the way I think about it, and I'm just throwing this out there,
sure.
Tolkien's world is a world that operates in that ancient, legendary, mythic time before there is the promise of the Savior. When human beings have to fight evil without God's help in that direct way.
Right.
And so all of the heroism and valor and the challenges that they face in the first, second, and third age, one, they're the result of their own mistakes. Two, they don't have the promise of a savior. It's on them. Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And three, it means whatever victories they have over this evil that they face are going to be temporary until the real savior arrives. So that's how I situate it.
Sure. And then keep going.
No. And so I liked your question a lot, because the attempt to defeat death, to destroy the ring, is itself the attempt to defeat the desire to destroy death.
Yeah, to live ultimately, right?
Because, well, here's the thing. And maybe I'm switching gears a little bit here, and I apologize.
No, you're good.
I had a kid. I was principal of that Catholic school, and I had a kid, and this was during a time when the Marvel universe was like rising up in all of its glory with Spider-Man and then the X-Men. And I don't know if this was your experience of that time. Some of you are too young, probably. But my experience of it was wow, they finally got it right. Like, they're taking this film wise as seriously as the graphic novels and the comics did. And I love it. Like, you can't do this unless you take it seriously. You can't do a 1970s Christopher Reeves version of Superman and have it be credible unless you're going to take it seriously. And so during that period, that's when I was principal of this school. And I had a kid look at me one day, and he said, Mr. I wasn't doctor yet. So he said, Mr. Vorse, he said, wouldn't it be cool if we were immortal? And I looked at him and I said, we are. Now you need to decide how you want to spend it. And to this kid's credit, sixth grader though he was, he looked up at me and he said, I see what you did there. And that's kind of my point. My point is part of what's going on in the Lord of the Rings is for people to actually learn what their roles are. This is one of the reasons I don't wear a bracelet that says, "What would Jesus do?"
Right.
And I don't wear it because I know what he would do. He would do the one thing that I can't do, which is to
Right.
save me.
Mm.
Everything else, and this is what G.K. Chesterton said, everything that God can delegate to one of his creatures, he will delegate. So the one thing he reserves to himself is our salvation. Everything else is on us. And to me, that is totally Tolkien's world.
Yeah, man, love that. Your quote there reminds me of when Gandalf was in the mines of Moria, with Frodo. And when Frodo is all distraught, he's like wishing the ring never came to him, right? And I don't know, Nikki, do you remember that quote? I mean, I can say it, but I didn't know if you had that roll off your tongue. What Gandalf said to Frodo.
I can kind of paraphrase it. Basically, he said that we all look at these times, and when they're come to us, we wish that they didn't come, but they come because for a reason and for a purpose in our lives, and we've been chosen for that purpose for a reason. Kind of paraphrasing
Oh, that's
him,
beautiful.
but
Yeah.
basically
And
it.
then to add to that, right? Like all we can do is to pursue that role with the time that is given to us, and I love that. And before we kind of dovetail into the characters and their challenges, because I think that was one of the next topics, just wanted to thank everyone for being on this space. I know Becky hopped on, Mark hopped on, Old Grouchy and Seth and Alex have been on for a bit, so really appreciate you guys. Nikki, thank you so much for co-hosting, and Dr. Borst for all your knowledge. If you guys could kindly repost, and also if you want to comment, post maybe your favorite Lord of the Rings movie in GIF form. I think that would be kind of fun. I think if we did that like every kind of time, that'd be a fun way to build up some hype. Is for people to post some memes and some GIFs about Lord of the Rings, ones that you love. But I think to transition to the next step of the conversation, were there some characters that stood out to you, as we were prepping for this, and like their challenges? I know you were talking about that earlier when we were talking about like virtue and how these characters represent some great qualities, but they also have, challenges that they face. What were some characters that really stood out to you?
Is that to me?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is going to be self-serving, but like I struggle because I absolutely love Gandalf and wish that I could be like him. Galadriel, OMG, forget about the Rings of Power. The Galadriel of the Lord of the Rings, I am absolutely in love with, but she also scares the hell out of me. I love Samwise at the end of the day. I understand Bilbo and Frodo, but the relationship between Gimli and Legolas is so revealing.
Mm.
It's hard for me to pick. And I get. Speaking of movies, I'm not going to put it in the pill because honestly, I don't know how. But I'm going to say every time I get a little bit depressed, I turn on the Fellowship of the Rings,
Yeah.
and it just regrounds me. You know what I mean? Not that I don't love the other two films as well, or the books, but the Fellowship really just regrounds me
Mm.
and reminds me of what everything is actually about,
Right.
as opposed to what I want to imagine that it would be about. And and also I have kids. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I have an advantage over a lot of people. I have kids. I have a bride that I've been married to for 33 plus years.
Congratulations.
And yeah, I mean, yeah, God damn it. Excuse me. To quote, sorry, to quote Doc, um, it's the greatest gift that I've been given. Um, and every day, it's easy for me to step out my door, um, because I know what promises I made and I know what promises I have to keep.
Right.
And I think the Lord of the Rings actually is, in many ways, about not actually knowing what promises we've been asked to keep, discovering what our gifts are, discovering why we're here, discovering what our role is in combating the great evil that Tolkien saw in the world during World War One and the rise of fascism in Europe and all of that stuff. And figuring it out literally in the trenches in northern France.
Right.
I mean, it's an amazing. Not all of us are given the gift of that kind of suffering and struggle, but I don't think it means that we're not responsible for it, which is an ongoing thing with me as a person, which is why I'm on X in the first place. And if you guys are puzzled by me, I'm kind of glad, because I'm a good guy, but I'm also an asshole, and and I am on purpose, because I want to shock people back into realizing that, and this is, I think, part of Tolkien's message. You are meaningful, and so you do have a responsibility to figure out, if you are as complicated as I am, and I am, what that meaningfulness means and what it means you have to do. Now, if you're lucky and you've been so gifted to be a Samwise, you don't have to figure it out because it's not confusing to you.
Right.
For all the rest of us, it's confusing and it's tough.
Right.
And it's a hard work that we have to be dedicated to, which I've drawn inspiration for my whole life. But I've been given the gift of children, and I'm telling you guys, when you have a kid, it changed. Well, it should. I don't think it does for everybody, but it sure did for me. So I'll leave that there.
Yeah. Well said. Hey, just wanted to say hi to TD. What's up? How are you? And just a reminder to everybody, we'll talk a little bit and then we'll open it up. So if you want to speak, we'll have a time where you can request for that, and then we'll have you up on stage to ask us any questions that you have. So thanks for jumping on, TD. That's awesome. And if you guys haven't yet, repost the space. Be awesome to share with others, and also put your favorite Lord of the Rings GIF in there in the replies. I think it'd be fun to look at. But yeah, we're talking about concepts of Lord of the Rings and in conquering challenges. And I think, Dr. Boris, like something that really struck me while you were just like talking was just like how, and this is something that I think I think of as a truth, at least in my life. But like, I think when there's great pain in your life, there can also there's a gift in that. There's something that can be created that can actually can outshine whatever pain that was caused. I think I've shared with you all before, and I know Mark, I don't know if I've spoken to you before, sir, but I went through divorce last year, and I went through some really tough moments in my life where I had to really look in the mirror and just be like, what the heck is going on? Like I'm like losing, like my reality is like crumbling around me, and I've got to hold on to something. And number one, held on to God. But I'd say up there in the top 5 is definitely Lord of the Rings. That's just how important it's been to my life. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about Lord of the Rings concepts and like conquering challenges and like why it's such an important work. The books, the movies, all the lore behind it. But talking about that though, like, I love how you kind of talked about Samwise and how it's not really a question for Samwise. He's kind of just innately just plugged in, knows like what needs to be done. Like, we got to destroy the ring. If you can't carry it, I'm going to carry you. Just like amazing, there. And then from there, there's some different characters that struggle with different things. I think something that's interesting, because I think I've talked about this before as well, but I've talked about like my struggle with porn addiction and overcoming that. Something to think about is Gollum himself, and how this inner conflict, this addiction, cost him to just live this tormented life, this life of just being a prisoner to like the ring, and falling in love with it almost, to this maddeningly just creepy, beyond creepy kind of sense of just like he's a slave to the master and he calls the ring as precious. I've definitely been there before with addiction and with struggles. So I can empathize a lot with Golem, someone that's just sucked into something that's just so powerful early on without any real knowledge of just how deeply evil this thing is, and just how this addiction torments him. But at the end of the day, however method he got it done, Golem was the one that eventually destroyed the ring of power. And Golem was a hobbit. And I think that's one of the things we wanted to talk about as well, Dr. Boris, is just how hobbits become heroes. And first, though, just wanted to talk about that, like with Golem, and if you had any additional thoughts about that character. And he's such a pivotal character. I know he gets overshadowed sometimes. Like we talk about how cool Gandalf is, his wisdom, Aragorn, and his leadership, emulating what like a man looks like. Legolas is basically like perfect in whatever he does, and Gimli is just funny as all get out, and is just a tough son of a bee. And then you get the hobbits, but then who's talking about Smeagol? Who's talking about Golem, the one that actually destroyed the ring? Wanted to see what your thoughts were on that.
Well, I think that's an important point, because Golem represents the two sides of the coin that we're talking about. First of all, you're not going to be seduced by anything that you're not attracted to.
Right.
And
There has
so
to be some
Golem,
kind of like, hey, these are the powers you're going to get if you put on the ring.
yeah, so you go back to the root story of Smeagol, and he's attracted to the beauty of the ring. And
Right.
it's beauty that seduces him. Now, there are two ways to be attracted to beauty. You can either steal it or you can serve it. And that's
Mm,
the Iliad. That's the Iliad. The Trojans steal it, and the Greeks are outraged. And if you guys have seen Troy, actually Troy got this right. The Trojans seem to be the more admirable of the characters in that. It's harder to sympathize with the rage of the Greeks. That all of the kingdoms would unite and fight for the return of one wife of one king.
right.
And yet, when you read the Odyssey and you follow Telemachus's journey to visit with Menelaus and Helen is the healer. Um, it's an amazing thing. And it all comes down, and this all influenced Tolkien for sure, no doubt. That it's about marriage, it's about the family, it's about kids, it's about the Shire, it's about being good. Being good. How hard is it to be good? It's hard. And it's much easier. Now, when you look at Golem, you see a normal person who embraces the one thing that will give him the sort of control over his own life that he thinks that he lacks. And so the world that we live in, Nikki, speaking to you, C.S. Lewis, like Golem has all the earmarks of somebody who is willing to completely distort themselves in order to make the universe into a portrait of themselves and sort of claim a godlike. And his universe is small. He doesn't want to control the world, he just wants to have what he wants. And at the end of the day, say, this is mine and I control it. Which I don't know, Mac, you might speak to this too, but it seems to me that once Golem has the ring in The Hobbit, his response to possessing it is to hide it under a mountain. He doesn't aspire to rule the universe. He just wants to have it.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, to tie into addiction, right? To at least porn addiction in my part is once you obtain it, you just want to hide it. Like once you have that moment, when you're looking at it, and that's when you want to just hide it away. Your aspirations kind of go out the window. I struggled with it for 2 decades, and my aspirations and my inspirations and my goals, they were always seemed to be overshadowed by the ring of power, which was my addiction to porn. Always tempting me, always drawing me in, wanting, hey, put me on, put me on, and you'll get this secret power. You get this power of invisibility. No one's gonna have to know. You're gonna get this power that you could have anybody at your beck and call at any moment. All you got to do is look them up. It's this like you're kind of when Frodo puts on the ring. They have such a good imagery in the movie, like where I think he's in Amon Hen before the Uruk-hai try to get him, and he puts the ring of power on to hide. I think from Boromir, actually, when Boromir was trying to take the ring, and he gets like a direct link to like the Eye of Sauron, and gets so frightened that he just takes it off. Like, oh my gosh, like fights it. And I think in some ways, like in my journey with porn addiction, like there was that moment like where I came to the face of what it really was for me, and it was not good. It was Sauron just saying, hey, like you're going to be my slave. That's what I want you to do. That's your existence. That's your story, is to be a slave to me, to be a slave to yourself, to be a slave of this pleasure. And that's what Gollum was a slave to that, like you said, which is great. And it's like, I want what I want. I want to be sexually stimulated right now. I'm going to turn this on. But what happens over time is that becomes the shackles over your own wrists. So that was fantastic. I really appreciate you bringing that up, and that's just such beautiful imagery as well. I mean, not it's sad, but it's also beautiful.
Well, and let me add one more point to that extremely moving thing that you just said. Shame is built into Golem,
Right.
and so we have to ask ourselves, like, what is the root of the shame? Because Sauron doesn't share that shame. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the addiction that Gollum suffers is one that is privated, one that he wants to keep to himself. He doesn't want to share it with anybody. He just wants to be in control of it because he's a lost child.
Yeah.
Who feels that he's at the mercy of these powers that are so much greater than him, that if he could just have this one thing, if I could just have this one thing. And yet, his instinct, given the nature of humankind, because we are creatures of an all good creator, is to hide it.
Rather
He
than living in the
knows he
light.
has to hide it. And so I think that's a huge thing. Is that why like we live in an age where people boast their vices. They advertise them. They make money off of them. And
Maybe
they
that would
become,
be like kind of Boromir in a way. Hey, I can use this vice to bring it back to Minas Tirith, and we can use this weapon against the enemy, right? That's kind of
well,
Boromir's thinking.
Well, I wouldn't say Boromir is full bore like evil.
No,
He's
not at all.
he's a good man that thinks that the contest between the two forces in the universe are equal to each other, and if one could wield the weapon that would tip the balance, they should do that. I completely sympathize with that. I think it's a mistake we all make.
Oh yeah, I mean Boromir is
you-
such a relatable character. I think what I was trying to say was, I think what would have happened, right? Let's say if they brought the ring back to Gondor, like he proposed, it would have it would have devastated them because they would have all been seduced to its power, right?
Oh yeah.
So I think
No,
yeah,
I totally. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, but
no,
that's the whole point of the character of Denethor.
yeah,
Denethor's trajectory is a signal that Boromir was wrong. And remember this: he wanted to bring it back to his father to curry favor, to prove to his father that he could save the kingdom. And it wasn't his kingdom to save. Which goes back to what I was saying, is that Tolkien is writing during a time when human beings, this is the subcreation part of it, have to figure out what their role is without being the savior. Have you ever noticed that Gandalf never, ever plays the linchpin role in the winning of a battle?
Right. That's a great
He just
point.
doesn't do it.
Kind of just gives them a little advice. You guys
Yeah.
got this.
And he might do a little bit of flash, a little bit of flashlight, a little bit of I'm going to create a distraction.
Sure.
But because that's not his role.
Mm-hmm.
And he understands it.
Yeah, and him
And to
kind
me,
of. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I had something else about Gandalf, but you're on a roll.
No, I'm just going to go back to the Chesterton thing. Gandalf, of all of the characters in the trilogy, understands that God will not do anything himself, that he can defer to one of his creatures. But Gandalf's one of those rare characters who is not tempted to exceed his role.
Mm-hmm.
Ever. So in that way, Gandalf and Samwise, they're more alike than any of the other two characters I can think of.
I love that. That's the beauty of him. That's why I think Gandalf seems so kind of, in a way. But that's why you were talking about allegory earlier, with like Aslan being like Jesus Christ. It's not necessarily like Gandalf like represents Jesus, right? But he has some of that divine power. And he chooses for us to say, hey, like you got to fill that up. You got to step up to the plate. Like I'm not gonna hit the ball for you. Like, you got the bat. You might miss it a few times and have some strikes, but eventually you're gonna get on base and maybe hit a home run someday.
Yeah, I would say that Gandalf and the five wizards. Notice the numbers. 9 rings to the men, right? 3 rings to the elves. 7 rings to the dwarves, right? How many wizards are there?
I think there's 3, right?
No, there's
At least
5.
that are in the initially.
No, there's
What are the
5.
other 2?
The other 2 are the 2 disciples that went to the east that we never hear about in biblical tales again. They converted the east. So you've got the named ones. You've got the 3 named ones: Saruman, Gandalf, and
Radagast.
Radagast, who I loved, and I hated what they did with them in The Hobbit.
we
But I
we hate a lot of things about that. I think I'm speaking for more people.
I understood why they did that as filmmakers. I'm a film guy. I get that. That's fine. Like, why wouldn't you exploit such a colorful? But like, literally, you only see Radagast once, in the mythology, because he's on other errands, like Glorfindel. He's on other errands. There are other evils in this world that don't attach to this particular story that other people have responsibilities to. And Radagast was one of those. And he did go. There's a rumor, Witch of Angmar. He went. You know what I mean?
Like a consultation.
He reported back to Gandalf. I get that. But what this is the way I read that in Tolkien's subcreation. Gandalf's actually an embodied angel, which is what the wizards are. They're embodied angels. They're not human. They're not gods. There are no gods in there's only one god in listen to me trip over myself and say Faulkner. There's only one god in Tolkien's mythology, and that is God, the God that you and I actually understand if you're from a Judeo-Christian background. And so in this subcreation, the wizards actually are angels that have been embodied. And if anybody's seen Wim Wenders' Wings of Desire, I totally recommend it, because it kind of dips into the same kind of idea in a flawed way, but it's beautiful. But anyway, so I think of Gandalf as an angel, a non-fallen angel. He's one of the lesser angels. He's not Raphael. He's not Michael. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's of an order just below those, and he was sent help out, and he's perfect in that sense. You notice he doesn't make a mistake. And, the elves, the 3 rings that are not captured by Sauron are the ones that belong to the elves. And I'd really like to hear some of our listeners' thoughts on, well, what the hell is the relationship between the elves, the dwarves, and men and hobbits in this mythology? Like, how are we supposed to understand who they are, where they came from, and how they fit in?
Yeah, it's great. I've been trying to invite Nikki to co-host, and this is not working out. But if you guys want to speak, go ahead and request to speak, and we can get you up on here. And hopefully this is not me glitching out. I'm going to try and mute the space really quick and then unmute it. That might help. Okay, anyone want to speak? Go ahead and wave if you'd like to speak. Ask a question. Alex, you got anything to say, sir? Any questions for the professor on how they fit in? And if not, we can go ahead and dive into that if you'd like, because I think the comparisons are quite interesting. I think sometimes, I think what we're getting at in some of this conversation is that, the most relatable character really to our situation is being a hobbit, right? And what are these other kind of like the dwarves and the elves, the men, what do they represent, in this? So I don't know, Dr. Boris, if you had some thoughts on that.
Well, of course I do. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
No, I think in this sub-creation, all right, so there are a couple of things I'd like to, this is my opinion, disabuse people of. When I was in Louisiana and the movies came out, let me just do an aside here. I did this great thing. My wife was teaching for me. She was an 8th grade teacher. She has a master's. And she came to me one day at school and said, "Are you going to go see the Fellowship of the Rings?" Because she'd taken all of her 8th graders to see it. And my experience of Lord of the Rings in the 70s was I had read everything, and then Ralph Bakshi came out with an animated version, which actually is a great precursor to motion capture. And it was not a good movie. It wasn't terrible. It was faithful, but it wasn't finished. It went over budget. But what Bakshi did in that film is he used live actors to film it, and then he had animators paint over every cell of the film to animate, which is amazing. But he ran out of money. Studio said, "You're done. We're just going to put it out," and it just ended. It just ended. Like, it wasn't the whole thing. And I went to it with a friend of mine, and he was like, I'd been talking up Tolkien with him. He didn't know Tolkien. He hated the movie. He's like, "What'd you think?" And I said to myself, this is in 1978 or 9. I said to him, I said, "This movie cannot be made until they can actually make it with regular sized people playing all the roles." And then the Fellowship came out, and my wife comes to me and she goes, Are you gonna go see this?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, today's the last day it's in the theater."
No way.
And so I walked down to the kindergarten room. I told my secretary, I said, "I'm leaving." I had no appointments. I said, "Okay." I walked down to the kindergarten room and I grabbed my son, Eamon. And he thought he was in trouble. I said, "You're coming with me."
Nice.
And I drove him to the theater, and we got to the movie, and he was like, "What are we doing?" And I was like, "We're going to watch a movie together, you and me." And that movie started. And you remember the scene where they fall out of Farmer, what's his name's field into the mushroom?
Farmer Maggot.
Yeah, Farmer Maggot's field, and they fall onto the carrots and the mushrooms. And then that's when the Dark Riders show up the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked up at me in that scene when the bugs are crawling out of the soil. And he said, I want to go back to school."
He scared him straight.
Oh my God, he was so frightened. And so I looked at him and I said, "Okay, I understand that." I said, "Let's wait 5 more minutes."
You're like, "I think we're gonna be okay. Just make
And
it
I was
through."
like, if if you want to go, we'll go. And I meant it. As a dad, I
Yeah,
meant it. I could
sure.
tell how scared he was.
Sure.
And then freaking 30 minutes went by, and I remembered that I had said that. I looked at him and I was like, hey, do you want to go back to school? He was like, He's like, he was totally like, it's one of those seminal memories that we have, father son
That's
things.
pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. But I bring all that up because, you know, when you're thinking about when I was at that school, a bunch of our Catholic families, you know, they love the movies and stuff. And, you know, they're coming to me and they were like, you saw it, you know, what about this? What about this? And, you know, I had a little bit of a background, of course. And that they were Catholic and they just wanted it, you know, yes, it's a Catholic universe. They're like, oh, and Galadriel, she's like, you know, she's like the Virgin Mother. And I was like, no, no, she's not. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, all right, so what you guys have to understand about the subcreation here is that in Tolkien's Garden of Eden, there were two different sets of children that were made. And the elves are the ones that didn't fall from the garden. Men are. And that's the difference between them. And by the way, Mac, this goes to the third part of our conversation. What
Yeah,
are the
sure.
differences? What are the differences in the nature of the different races of dwarves, of elves, and of men and of hobbits? So they all belong in the fallen world. They all operate in the fallen world, but Galadriel is not the Virgin Mother. That's more like Aragorn's mom in a way. If you watch the extended version. But Galadriel is more like when Frodo goes to meet Galadriel at the fountain, you know, and offers her the ring. You have to think of Galadriel there as like an unfallen Eve. Like, can you guys imagine living in an unfallen world? What it would be like? Well, Eve would still be here. So would Adam. They'd be unfallen. They'd be our parents. Like, if we lived in the unfallen world, we would make a trek to meet our mother once. And when we encountered her, we would approach her the way Frodo approaches Galadriel in that scene. We would be frightened and awestruck and trembling with anticipation about the way our mother, our original mother, was going to recognize us and embrace us and be with us. So she would be frightening. Men, on the other hand, and Aragorn comes from that group of the Númenóreans who did not fall. So they're granted, I mean, they fell, but they're granted long life. And then, do you guys know the mythology of the dwarves? Somebody in here does, because the dwarves are children of a lesser god. The dwarves were creations of a lesser angel who wanted to imitate God's creative power and made them into little automatons, little robots. And when God discovered what he'd been doing, which he knew the whole time, this is a Silmarillion, he came and said that they are abominations. You need to strike them dead. And at the moment that the angel was obeying God to strike his little 7 dwarf kings dead, God granted them actual life and they cowered in fear. And God said, that's what you can't give them. You can't give them free will. So I just throw that in there so that you can think about the way Tolkien was unpacking in his mythology the different aspects of our virtues and vices through the different races that are related to each other and why they are different from each other. Their vices are different and their virtues are different.
That's amazing. Thanks for going over that. Real quick, Greg, Dr. Boris, can you hear any background noise?
I wasn't just now.
Okay, do you hear any right now?
I do not.
Okay, cool. I've got my air conditioning on. It is flipping hot here. It's like 90 degrees. I had it off just because I was worried about it causing disturbance, but Oh man, so I work and live out of a camper that I bought last year. I've been traveling using Starlink. Oh my gosh, this thing can heat up real quick. So I just wanted to check that real quick. So hey everyone, thanks for being on. Still, we're getting close to 2 hours now, which is great. Becky, Paul, Marilda, Seth. I know Alex. I think you messaged me saying that you're just gonna be listening. If any of you guys want to speak, I think I sent a request to you. Uh, for some reason, I've been kind of having an issue. I've been trying to add Nikki on as a co-speaker. It's not working. But if you guys see a request, can you give me a thumbs up? If you do not see a request, can you give me a thumbs down? That'd really help me out. And again, if you see a request to speak, can you give me a thumbs up? If you do not see a request to speak, can you give me a thumbs down?
I just sent Nikki a speaker request, although I don't have as an option to make her a co-host, just so you know.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
Nikki, did you?
he got me up here to speaker. Yay!
Oh gosh, thank you.
Now you can make me co-host. Well, I'll help you out.
Yeah, so I'm trying. It's not, for some reason, I'm like clicking things and it's like not giving me an option to do that. So I don't know what's going on. But hey, Dr. Borsch, can you send some speaking requests out to everybody? Or if you want to speak, maybe give me a thumbs up. If you're in the crowd, if you want to speak, give me a thumbs up. If you're alive, if anyone is everyone alive here? If you're alive, give a thumbs up. Oh, there is? Okay, cool. I can work on that.
All right, I just sent everybody a speaker request, whether they had one up or not. And so, if you guys want to speak, we would love to hear from you. I don't want to be fucking sucking the air out of the room all night long. Would love to hear from you guys, because that's what Spaces is about, and we want to get to know you. And thank you for joining us. It's really really kind. Appreciate it.
I want to hear from Nikki.
About which part?
About any of the parts.
Okay. Well, Dr. Gregory, you said some stuff about something about ladies and what we thought about what was going on with the men taking care of everything, basically, and the women being in the background. Am I right?
I did.
Would you put that question forward again so that me and Becky may be able to hear it and be able to answer you?
My question really is this. I think in the war between the sexes that's been going on forever, one of the arguments has been that, literature has been dominated by men, and men write about men, and women get secondary roles. I'm really a paleo feminist in the sense that I feel like the feminists have continually misread, especially ancient myth and Greek myth, literature, have misunderstood the importance of women in their role in uh, producing culture as opposed to civilization. And that doesn't mean that women aren't civilized. It means that their role is different from men, and men's role is different from theirs. I think it's a hot topic right now. I think it's very very adjacent to the conversation that we're having right now. And so my question is, when you when if you're a woman and you read Tolkien, were you disappointed in the fact that the women weren't the ones? Because like Rings of Power is doing this right now. They're getting woke, and they're trying to amp up the Hobbit did this a little bit too. The role that women play, and this kind of goes back to our little bit of a discussion of Rosie. So I'm just curious, what is your take on that? Is it a deficit on Tolkien's part, or is he understanding something really, really important about the difference between the genders, and sexualities of women and men in the salvation of the world? Because I think he has something important to say but it might not go with current cultural vocabulary. Let me put it that way.
Okay, Becky, is it all right if I take it right now and you can come in later? Or how do you want to do this? Hello? Becky, are you there? All right, I'm going to go ahead and I'll take it. Love it. Gregory, when I look at The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and The Silmarillion, even when I look at the movies and I look at the Rings of Power, the abomination that must not be named, I'm going to use a little bit of, Harry Potter there, um, the show that must not be named. Uh, Basically, I look at the ladies in the books and look at what part they played. And every single one of them becomes an inspiration to a man to do something heroic. Like we were talking about Rosie in the very beginning of the book and stuff, when they're leaving out and stuff like that. There's a little part where Sam has a little conversation and stuff with her and everything and stuff like that. Then you go on a little bit farther and you see that there's a conversation between Arwen and Aragorn. And then you go a little farther and you see a conversation between this one and that one. And there's not a lot of female interaction. Like even in the movies, they brought Arwen in for Glorfindel, which Glorfindel was always one of my favorite parts of the book, even though he's only in that one little part. And they brought her in, but she was once again inspiration. And that's what I kept seeing all through. Even when Frodo goes before Galadriel and the vessel, and she pours the water into the vessel, and he looks into the water, she is an inspiration to Frodo to carry on. She gives him hope that even the smallest person can do the biggest things. So maybe they may not be in the wars until a little later on, because then we have the little outplayer of Eowyn, who is the one that is shown as being the housekeeper. She's the one that is in the home of the Rohirrim. She is kind of like the lesser princess, because she is only niece to the king. She is not daughter. She's just niece to the king. So she's like the lesser princess. She's the lesser one. And she has been taught and trained by her brother and by her cousin and stuff to fight. She knows how to fight. She knows how to be in war. And her whole thing is a terror of the man Grima, who has stalked her in her dreams and in her nightmares, the terror that's come with what's happened to Theoden. She's the one closest. And once again, she has all this, it's almost like an abusive way of thinking of it. If you look at it, she's been oppressed in a way. And he lets that be shown. Tolkien shows it in the book. When you read about how, she's like always the one that takes care of everything, and everything's put on her shoulders. While the boys go out and they're fighting orcs and stuff, she's back home making sure everything's running correctly, and she wants to be out there. And Tolkien shows that this one woman, if it wasn't for her, the highest Nagzul would not have been brought down. The king of Agvar would not have been brought down, because she was the fulfillment of a prophecy that was made many, many, many years ago, and which he spoke a couple times, the king of Agmar did, saying that no man can kill me. And at that one point, when she's about to cut his head off, she takes off that, helmet, and she says, I am no man, showing that women have power to fight, but only when they are called to fight. And that's the one thing that Tolkien and even C.S. Lewis, because C.S. Lewis himself in his Chronicles of Narnia, Santa Claus tells the girls, I'm giving you a sword, I'm giving you a knife, but I don't want you in battle. I'm giving you a quiver of swords, but this is just to protect yourselves. I really don't want you in battle, because girls don't need to be in battle. And that's how Tolkien felt too. He didn't believe women needed to be in battle. They needed to be home and be the inspiration to the men who were in battle, to be the ones who kept the home fires burning and kept the men knowing there is a reason to get through this war. There is a reason to survive. There is a reason to go home. And then if you get farther along in the book, once you see Eowyn, she gets wounded, and it's a very deathly wound. And Aragorn can bring her back only to a certain extent. Even though she loved him, he couldn't bring her back fully. And it was her brother that stepped in and called her completely back, if I'm correct. Am I right, Gregory? He used,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yes.
because he said, she loves you more than me. I'm just an idea of love to her. And then she's in the hospital and she's being cared for, and she's all ants in her pants and wanting to get out and thinking, I need to go to war. And here comes Faramir, who has been wounded, deathly ill, brought back by Aragorn too, by his love for his new king. And he looks at her, falls in love with her, and just like is totally gaga goo goo over this woman. And she doesn't catch it because she's still looking at, I want to be out there in war. And he is looking at, my God, she's beautiful and I want her. And it's kind of the coolest love story on the planet, because once he talks to her and shows her that she's inspiring him to get better and to heal and become a better man for her, it's beautiful. Once again, not knowing it, she inspires the man to become a better person. And that's what Tolkien keeps spreading throughout the whole thing. Rosie for Sam. You've got Galadriel for Frodo. You've got Arwen for Aragorn. And you've got Eowyn for Faramir. So I believe the women are the inspiration. I believe they're the ones that drive the men to do what they're doing. I might be
But
wrong. There you go.
no, I don't think you're wrong. I think you're right.
Agree.
I think it's what men don't understand at the beginning of the saga that they have to come to understand by the end of it. And I think the name of your next spaces where you host is the saga of the lesser princesses. So you should think about that.
Put Awen up there.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. But look,
and Rosie.
there,
Need a whole space to talk about Rosie.
There's a reason.
Do you guys mind if I jump in here for a minute?
Go ahead.
I don't.
Cool. So Nikki, that was very spot on in my opinion. I mean, throughout Tolkien's Legendarium, you see the women being an inspiration, but they also bring balance. And if you look back in the Silmarillion and everything, even between Manwë and Varda and Ase and Uinen, they always bring power or bring balance and enhance the power of the male. And they're always something for them to bounce off of to improve themselves, kind of like what you're talking about. And one of my favorite things in the Houses of Healing that you touched on is that Aragorn, he could only bring Eowyn back to a certain point, and it's because she loved the idea of what Aragorn was. She loved the idea of the glory that he possessed, but she didn't actually love him. And when Faramir comes out, just like you mentioned, with him being wounded to the death, and then he actually confronts her, and he's basically like, do you want me to speak plainly? Because I need to basically tell you I love you and there's nothing more beautiful than you. And it changes something in her. It changes her whole nature. Up until that point, you only see Eowyn as a shield maiden, as somebody that wants to go out and fight. And then she sees the true love of a man that, yes, he has glory and battle and prestige, but somebody that she is willing to say, okay, I don't need to keep pursuing glory outside of this. Now I can settle down with this man and have glory within this relationship instead of seeking it outside of that. So the Houses of Healing is one of my favorite chapters, and I thought that was just well said on your part.
And I would add that the Eowyn Faramir love story reminds me of Odysseus's homecoming with Penelope. And I want you guys to go back and revisit that, because the whole point of all of Odysseus's suffering is to remind him of who he is vis-a-vis his relationship with Penelope. And I'm about to fucking cry, because that's what he doesn't get. He doesn't get until the end of everything that the reason that he fought this war was not for Helen, although it was for Helen. It was for Penelope and for his son Telemachus. And I think that Tolkien touches on this thing that men, God damn it, we aspire to it and we don't get it. There is something mysterious about the role that women play in all of our meaning that we cannot articulate. There's a reason, by the way, everybody, that men's reproductive organs are on the outsides of their bodies. They fucking bump into things. Women's are secret. They have been withheld from us by the gods for a reason. All the violations that we're seeing in Colorado, you can speak to this vis-a-vis porn, that we have suffered through in the last, 50 years are a convincing of women that their bodies can be used the way men's bodies can be used. And it's not true. It's extraordinarily damaging to everything about the dignity of a human being. Women are the guardians of that dignity. And there's a secret that we can't know, that we simply, sorry. We have to serve it.
There is feminism wants to tell women that they have, a power over men, which I'm going to be honest and say is true. We do, in a way, have a thrall over men, but it's what you choose to do with the thrall you have. And with that, and when you see how the inspiration of Galadriel, she's almost all powerful in some ways. Her powers are excessively phenomenal. I mean, this is not some woman who just is a magical witch. We're talking a lady that could blow up whole armies, just with a ping, you know what I mean? So she has all this power, and she could overrule Frodo, and she could sway Frodo to her own side because of that thrall she has. Because even Frodo, when he saw her in his own mind, he's like, she's the most beautiful thing on the planet, just like Gimli. But when she showed herself to be, she could be the evil queen, she'd be beautiful but terrifying. And when she showed herself, he still would have given her the ring. But it was her own choice. Once again, we ladies have some power, but we have a choice on how we use it. She chose to diminish. She chose to be just Galadriel. She just chose to be the queen. She just chose to be in her spot like Gandalf. And it's really cool, that dynamic right there. Because when you see Frodo put his hand out, you can have it. I'll give it to you. And even when she is that terrifying queen, his hand is still out. He never pulls it back. He never terrifies and shies back. He still has his hand out. So that's one thing that I did see, and that's one thing we ladies need to remember. We have something in us. We were made to be helpmates. We were created by the Almighty God to be the helpmate. And we are also the ones that are to bring the respect to the man. I mean, when you look in Proverbs and read about the Proverbs wife and the Proverbs lady, she runs the whole freaking thing. And she brings status to her husband because of what she does. And it's so cool how God made that way. Yes, you guys are the head, but as my mom used to say, yes, my husband is the head, but I'm the neck. That term.
I've heard that one before.
Nikki, I would add, let us not forget the dynamic of the relationship between Galadriel and Celeborn, because Celeborn takes a completely backseat to Galadriel in The Lord of the Rings.
He only has like one line, tell me where is Gandalf, for I much desire to speak with him.
And I think that's really, really important.
Right.
That Tolkien included that there can be a dynamic in marriage where a husband, and by the way, let us recall what husband means. It means to serve.
The caretaker.
And like so in Galadriel and Celeborn, you have the perfect marriage. And to me, this stands in contradistinction to the feminists who don't understand what they're reading, don't understand the power that women have in the world as the culture bearers, and don't understand that what Tolkien was pointing out is that, one, it is very difficult. Like Samwise, Galadriel, Celeborn, Gandalf, they're rarefied beings that understand who they are and do what they do. All the rest of us, well, then we can have the third segment be about characters that we most relate to because we're all fucked
up. That's a good segue. And again, thanks everyone we're almost at 2 hours. So great discussion. I'm absolutely just ecstatic. And Seth, thanks for sharing what you had to say. For some reason on my end, I can only see Greg as the co-host, Nikki as the speaker. I don't know who else is speaker. I should have just ran this on my phone, but I wanted to make sure I had some good audio quality with my headset. So my apologies. But before we move on, I just wanted to see anybody else that's a speaker would like to share any other thoughts before we move on to what characters we relate to the most and why. A moment of silence. And if you're enjoying the space, go ahead and repost it, share it. I think are we still going? Sorry, can you hear me? I saw the unmute space button.
Yeah, you muted everybody.
Oh, I did? Oh my gosh, my bad. Dude, like the amount of just tech issues, it seems like, is a little bit more than normal, but that's okay. Yeah, thanks for everyone for just being on. What a dream to be able to talk to an English professor and a great man, Dr. Gregory Boris, about Lord of the Rings. And guys, I'm going to put this on my podcast. I'm super pumped up. I think a lot of my listeners on there are going to love it, which, a lot of family members, things like that. I'm growing my audience, but gosh, I just love Lord of the Rings. So it's so cool to talk about it. And just the depth of knowledge from Nikki, from Dr. Boris, from Seth, Alexander too, you chimed in early on, loved it. Just wanted to know, like TD, Becky, Anyone else have anything to say about kind of that segment? What your takeaways were before we move on? If not, it's totally fine.
I have
I'll jump
invited.
in real quick, if that's cool.
Yeah, man.
This is kind of tied into Dr. Gregory speaking about people not understanding what they're reading. And I think the reason Tolkien's works have withstanded the test of time is because everybody, even though he hated direct allegory, everybody can relate to his characters because he hits at the soul of human nature. And so no matter the situation that they see in that they encounter in Lord of the Rings or the Silmarillion or any of the unfinished tales, I mean, the struggles that they are facing is something that we can all relate to. And when it comes to the modern world, I guess we'll say, they're trying to warp human nature at its core by changing definitions. And in doing so, they're unable to just understand what Tolkien is actually trying to get across.
Love it.
Can I speak to that?
Go ahead.
This is a great point. So, Mac and I were talking earlier about the influences of World War I and, Tolkien's own experience fighting in the trenches in northern France at the Battle of the Somme and all that stuff. And, I had a memory that he denied that there was that influence, but then Mac sent me a couple of videos. One of them was like 3 hours long, so I couldn't watch it. Mac, I will watch it. But I watched the shorter one and I thought it hit all the right notes. And so I'm going to hit on something. Don't want to get us off track, but I'm going to anyway, because I'm me. Tolkien belongs to that generation that saw the flowering of the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
And the Shire has a lot to do with this, like what his conception of the Shire is, and what communitarianism is, and localism is, and environmentalism is, and all of those isms that we are tracking now and being lectured about. I had a mentor at the University of Dallas, Dr. Donald Cowan, who wrote a book called Unbinding Prometheus. I recommend it to you all. It's about the ongoing war between the god of wisdom, Zeus, and the god of foresight, Prometheus, in the battle over human beings. I'm not claiming here a direct influence of Tolkien, but I think that Dr. Donald, who was a friend of mine, ultimately, was getting at in his book. And one of the points he made in his book was that, and I think this is something that Tolkien feared and noticed and was worried about. And I think it explains a lot about the world that we're in. What Dr. Donald said was, he said, you have to notice that all of the inventions of human beings up until the end of the Industrial Revolution were extensions of our musculoskeletal systems, our muscles and our bones. But the information age, the satellite age, the smartphone age is an extension of our nervous systems and our brains. I think Tolkien was predicting a little bit of what the ramifications of that would be. And so this is the connection to porn, okay? Because up until the end of the Industrial Revolution, everything that we invented was simply to make us bigger and stronger, to move more dirt, and to build things, and to conquer the landscape, or at least command it. But up until that point, we had always been gardeners. We always existed in our landscape. We existed inside our bodies. We existed in our names and our work and our places. All of that has been completely destroyed by the releasing of our nervous systems and our brains into space.
Mm.
Do y'all see where I'm going? Now I'm going to be philosophic on it.
Please, I love this.
We have now figured out how to violate Aristotle's law of non-contradiction. We now can be in two places at one time and not in our bodies, which explains why porn is so fucking weird. Because, and I mean this as a good thing. I don't mean it as a good thing. I mean it as a good thing. Follow me here. We are so disassociated from our existence in our own bodies that this violation of what it means to be a person is getting expressed in the most bizarre ways of porn, of transsexualism, of everything. And if you guys know anything about Greek myth, the Greeks already predicted all of this anyway. So to me, it's a tragic and sad. Like, really, like they were right about this. It's an amazing thing, and I think Tolkien, in his way, was trying to draw us back from the power that Sauron's ring offers to us, because it dehumanizes us. And
yeah, turns us into slaves, right?
Right. And oh, did you notice that at the end of the movie, and they got this right, when Aragorn turns and says, for me, I'm going. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
he turns his sword and he runs. And then if you guys notice, go back and look at that shot of the Fellowship running out to meet the hordes that are coming out of the gates of Mordor. The Hobbits outrun everybody.
Which
is really,
dude, my I get goosebumps. I think it's Pippin and Merry are just out and at it. It's so cool.
It's so cool, but
it's one of the best shots.
But when Sauron's tower falls, all of the hordes that are up against the Fellowship and their loyals,
right,
they look up into the sky like all at the same time, and then they just run. And it's because they were seduced and they were not in control of their wills. And as soon as Sauron falls, their wills are released and they flee. They do the first free thing they've ever done.
Just freaking run away from that.
And I think it's a beautiful moment. Like if you are enthralled to the wrong things and you are offered and you are given, and it's a battle, an opportunity to flee, you would do it. I think that what most people face, though, is they don't run across heroes who will slay the dragon and hold out their hand and say, go, be free. And so, Mac, I'd like you to speak to that.
Yeah.
Because how do you come out of it if you have to become your own hero? To me, that is the heart. Like, I have sons, I have daughters. I get how women do it, Nikki. Y'all are capable of making a human being come out of your vaginas. Like, duh.
Yeah, it's a superpower.
It's a superpower.
To put you on a different tier, I feel
that's like second, third, fourth, fifth.
That's Galadriel level.
I as a man can put up a picture on X with me smoking a cigarette and being ridiculously good looking, and I don't have that. I don't have that. I can beat ass cancer all day long, and I don't have it. I don't have it. And so I think that what Tolkien also is speaking to at the end of the day is what it means to be a man. And I think he gets it right.
Yeah. can I speak to that? I think that kind of hops into the character that I relate to the most, and maybe
Yeah,
that's a good thing.
absolutely.
Yeah, man. So I just remembered, it was a thought that I was having. I think actually before like my divorce kind of went downhill, I actually was gonna do my podcast in my important free millennial. Like I had it all written it out and everything, like while I was in my marriage, and I just remembered I had a really bad relapse where I looked at porn again after I think it was like a year and a half of sobriety, and I was so ashamed of it. And I remember it was like that was like a week after I created like my Substack for Porn Free Millennial and my podcast. I had all these ideas. I was excited. I was thinking about Aragorn as well. Like that's the character I relate to the most. Like, hey, like I'm finally kind of accepting like my destiny or my role, so to speak, to be a leader and to be a beacon of hope, to be the flame of the West, so to speak, to show that men can do it. Men can be heroes. That's been my inspiration, and I had this relapse, and then the lies of really what ended my marriage was just not being honest about my addiction and just really fighting it alone, kind of fighting it like a ranger, kind of being alone, become a lone wolf for a while, fighting this fight, but then finally realizing, and I think this is why I connect to Aragorn so much, is realizing like I had my doubts. I had a lot of self-doubt about this role for me, but I think God kept speaking in my ear and just things happening in life to where I think the divorce was a gift in itself to really ignite the flame within me to say, hey dude, like you need to get on X, you need to get on Apple, Spotify, Substack, Medium, like put your content out there, share your story, be vulnerable, and just accept your identity, accept who you are, accept the sword, right? Narsil that was broken, or not Narsil, sorry. Uh, no, I think it is. Am I screwing that up? No,
It's Nazgul. It's Narsil. It's
Narsil. Yeah,
Narsil.
yeah. So the sword that was broken, right, and then remade. Um, that to me really resonated with me. So it wasn't just Aragorn, but was just the and I know it's a little bit different in the books, but like if you just think about the movie, and the movies just I love the books, but the movies like just resonate with me a lot, where Elrond's like accept your destiny, and hands him Anduril, which is the remade sword that was broken. And oh my gosh, like that metaphor to me sums up like my whole mission, like what the flame is inside of me, and like how I've conquered my challenges, like going through a divorce, feeling like I didn't want to go on anymore with life, calling the hotline, getting help, getting a therapist, getting back into like porn addiction therapy, getting in groups, getting in church groups, buying an RV, traveling the country. All of it was because I'm like, I need to reforge who I am. I'm a broken sword, man, and I want to be a whole again, and I want to be remade stronger so that the enemy fears me. The enemy fears when I have my sword, and then when I'm being a leader, when I'm leading by example, when I'm embracing what my responsibility is. And I think my responsibility, one of my main ones that I look at in life, is to help make a difference on this topic of porn addiction. I think help make a difference through sharing my story, sharing my experiences. Hopefully, that can help somebody. I know it's already helped like my little brother, family members, friends, some listeners. It's something I hope I can spread to people, because I think for me, like you were saying, Dr. Boris, like sometimes you don't have exactly like that person. And I think that's a big thing like that Aragorn did to make the hobbits heroes, was on Weathertop, like fighting against the Nazgul, fighting against the Black Riders, pushing them off, buying Frodo some time to live. Aragorn did so many things, I think, of bravery and being a man, being someone that's kind but also has force and can kill if needed, someone that's dangerous. And I think that inspired the hobbits to be better, to you can kind of see it in the Fellowship, like especially like Merry and Pippin go through probably one of the biggest character arcs, I would say, like in the books and the movies, is like just their character arcs are crazy. But I think everyone just looks up to Aragorn so much, and the others as well, Legolas, Gimli, Boromir, ended up dying valiantly, Gandalf. But I think Aragorn like represent kind of the future, right? Like the hobbits are going to have to coexist with the humans. And I think Aragorn was able to prove, because initially there's not that trust between hobbits and humans. Like the hobbits don't really trust the humans. The humans kind of treat the hobbits a little bit differently, right? Like the little folk kind of look down upon them, don't really, think much of them. And Aragorn is able to show, what the future looks like. And, at the very end, he tells them, you bow to no one. I thought that was just so beautiful because the hobbits were the heroes. But like you said, Dr. Boris, I think, there should be some inspirations in life. Both like I look up to my parents. I look up to a lot of people that have helped me. Like my therapist has been huge. My porn-free coach, he's got a podcast, Finding Traction, that's fantastic. I talk to him every week. These people I look up to because they're kind of like the Aragorns in my life in a way, to where they're fending off the hordes with their sword or with the flame, And at the end of the day, it's kind of cool. The symbolism there is like Aragorn initially, like, I guess in the movie on Weathertop, has like, his it's kind of his normal quote unquote sword and like a flame to fight the Nazgul. But then towards the end, he just has his sword Anduril, which is the flame of the West. He doesn't need to have like a torch. It's just there in the sword. It's there within him. So I think, to me, like I've really clinged on to that. That was something that I thought about like kind of before the divorce, when I was formulating my idea of, hey, I should make, a publication or a podcast to help people. And then I had my kind of my fall and my obscurity, where I kind of turned into the Strider for a bit. And then I think late, say the year and a half or so, I've really accepted, and embraced the responsibility that I have. And my goal really is to be a beacon of hope, to show that men can live in integrity. Men can, be that person, and so that's a character that I cling on to the most. I'm not like I don't have any tattoos on me myself. If I ever was to get one, I would definitely get Anduril on me, because I just think that sword, it represents like so much to me. It's like being broken and then being remade. To me, is just like that's like my destiny. That's like my role. I think is to remake myself, but to do it through being a beacon of hope and hopefully like a leader to other people, and to learn from other people as well. It's not like Aragorn just knew everything. Like he had to kind of learn from the hobbits, learn from Legolas, Boromir, Gimli, Gandalf. Like he was always listening and learning. So that's the character that I think aspire to be like, is Aragorn. What about you?
I'm gonna say, don't forget that when we meet Aragorn, we meet him at the end of a long period where he's been denying his destiny.
Right.
And I think that that's something that, especially the women characters actually speak to the men in The Lord of the Rings, that they deny their greatness, and they deny, and maybe for some of you who are not familiar with me, it's one of the things that once I got on X, because I am permanently banned from Facebook because I'm too fucking funny. I'm permanently banned from Facebook because, I've fashioned a persona on here, which is very similar to me. But going along with what Colorado has been saying, I have embraced who I am, and that's what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to shy away from it. I'm not going to not apologize when I get it wrong, and I do get it wrong sometimes. But my message in being a part of this spaces is to men, to embrace their strengths, to keep their promises. Don't make any promises that you won't keep. Don't make any promises that you can't keep. Be wise. And then once you've made those promises, fucking live them. And I think that Tolkien's mythology is an encouragement to all of us that we can. We do have to accept what our role is. I don't know, Mac. I don't know. Like you
Yeah.
know, you've asked the question, "Who's your character?" I'm like, I don't know who to pick. Like, I wish I was Samwise, but I'm not.
Right. You're giving off a little bit of Gimli energy, which I love.
No, and I'm a lot of Gimli. God, I have such a dwarf. I have
There
such
should be like a
dwarf crush
personality
on him.
test.
I really do. Because here's the thing that I love about Gimli. Dwarves are warped. They're short, they're too dense, they're too focused. They live under mountains. They love beauty, but they don't love it in the right way. They hoard it. You know what I mean? They
Yeah.
craft beautiful things. And yet, Gimli, oh my man, Gimli. He walks into Lothlorien spouting off that Galadriel is a witch. And when he leaves, he asks her for 3 strands of hair.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And then the friendship between Legolas and Gimli in the unfinished tales and in the notes, fucking legendary.
Yeah.
Like, it's
just adventuring.
It's ridiculous. It's so good. So on the one hand, I want to
Well,
say I'm Gimli, but I don't know. I don't know. I want to be Samwise, and I kind of think I wish I was Aragorn. And disappointingly, I think I don't know. I think I'm more like Gandalf.
Disappointingly.
Well, just because I don't know that I can live up to it, but I'm gonna try.
I like it. The Wizard, Dr. Wizard Gregory Boris. Wizard Doctor. Yeah, that sounds better. No, I love that. You know, of course, you don't have to just have one character, but I think that's really cool. What you said about Gimli too, because he has a big arc as well, right? Like he's like elves suck. Like I don't want to be here with you. Like you guys like screwed our kind over, and then they become best friends, which is so cool. And I think like what brings them together maybe a little bit is just like slaying orcs. They're just like a great tag team. Like they're slaying down, you know, these forces of evil, or the hordes of you know, what's going to destroy what's good in this world. And they both like find just their love in that.
And
they're like, hey, we're taking them out together, baby.
And
like we're friends.
And of all of the characters in the trilogy, those 2 are the ones that have an innate sense of humor.
Right.
And I'm telling you, a sense of humor is a signal to the world that you are freaking wise. Because you can't actually be funny or have a sense of humor unless you have a sense of perspective. And I think Tolkien gave us that in those 2 characters. Like that scene in the movie in the 2 Towers, when Legolas says to Gimli, "Shall I get you a box?"
Oh yeah,
is golden.
It's great.
Like it's in the face of death. Shall I get you a box? I want to be.
May I comment on this for just a minute? Don't mean to interrupt, Gregory.
Go ahead.
But I have seen this interaction between all 3 of the men that I know on X the most: Mac, Gregory, and Doc. You 3 sometimes slam each other, and some of the roughest, toughest, meanest, nastiest things that a woman could read. And y'all go at it, and it's hilarious. My God, it's funny. Like when Gimli says, "Shall I get you a box?" Since, you know, Gimli's not tall enough to see over the battlements. You know, you guys do that. And it's so wonderful and precious. I know that sounds like a horrible word, but
My
when I say
precious.
I don't mean it like my
I know.
precious. You know, I mean it's it's sweet and it's brotherly and
Yeah.
it's a precious brotherly thing. And when I saw you, Mac, you and Doc were going out at one time, and I believe Jada got in the middle of it, if I'm correct.
Yeah, remember that.
And Doc told her, "Excuse me, do you not think we've talked before?" And she didn't know what was going on because being a female, she saw it as, "Oh my God, he's slamming him and taking him to bits." And I'm sitting here dying, going, "These guys are going to go at it, and I'm going to love it, and I'm going to laugh my ass off," because I understand the masculine relationship of brotherly love that you
Right.
two work with. And Dr. Gregory, you and Doc have went back and forth, and I've loved watching it because it's absolutely hilarious. Because it's iron sharpening iron, scripture.
I
It
love
is
it.
scripture when men come up against each other and they bang against each other, that iron hitting each other, you sharpen each other, you bring each other to a point, you make each other stronger in your brotherly love. And that's what we see with Gimli and with Legolas, that brotherly love that comes from two separate species, or as we could call it now, two different colors of people. You could say it could be an Asian and a black man, a white man and an Asian, a black and a white, but friends from a different race, a
Or
different species, even.
or just a different that's great. But just like maybe a little bit further, like just different walks of life, right? Like that you think wouldn't
Exactly.
like dwarves live under the mountain, like elves, like he lives in the trees. It's like
And
just
they took each
completely
other,
opposite walks of life.
and they took each other to each other's homes.
Yeah, that's a great
And
point.
they visited each other's homes, and they showed each other their homes. And then in the books, it's kind of given a little bit of mysticism, but it's believed that Gimli was the only dwarf to ever make it to the sacred lands. You know,
Mm.
that he was taken when Legolas went across the seas, that Gimli went with him.
And
So,
Gimli was the only non-ring bearer that got to go.
exactly. And it was because of the love, the brotherly love between the two of them.
That's
And
really
I've
cool.
heard people say, "Oh, they were homosexual." Bullshit. Bullshit.
Oh,
I call
Yeah, I
bullshit.
think they were just good buddies.
I want to
They were good buddies.
and I want to speak to that because the friendships that I have with men are totally non-homosexual, and it's because I appreciate real men when I meet them. I know who they are, and Nikki, I think you're speaking to this. Like there's something hugely admirable in men that can become, yeah, we're brothers, but we're friends. And I get them. I get them every time I meet them. Just about. I'm not perfect. Um,
There's some big power there though, man. Like you can I would just share like just some of my best friends, like we say the meanest crap to each other, all just because we're busting each other up. Like it has nothing to do with us actually being, mean, but it's just a great way to build camaraderie. And I'm so close to my buddies, like just would do anything for them. And there's so much power in that. Like when two men have that relationship to where I always hate the term when people say like no homo or whatever. It's just like, dude, just you don't have to qualify like just your love for another man, like just feeling admiration for him and just being happy to kind of get each other's goat sometimes and bust each other up. Like there's nothing sometimes better than that. It's a great quality to have in a friendship.
there's nothing better than that. And I will tell you this: men crave it, and it's what culture wants to crush right now. Not only is the culture trying to crush women and erase them, they're trying to crush men too. They're trying to erase the distinction between the two of them. They want to erase this friendship that we can have. I'm raising 2 boys. Hi, baby. My grands just walked out of the door. But it's been a very important thing for me to impart to them. I don't even know how to express it. How they need to be devoted to being men, and it's a hard thing in this culture because it's not prized, and that's partly why I am who I am on X, because I'm calling bullshit on that. And I'm trying to. Yeah. I don't think I have the power to reverse it, but I'm just gonna be that fucking smoking face that's looking at you, saying, "All right, do better than this."
I was gonna say, Dr. Boris, one thing that kind of struck me through this conversation too with characters is, like Saruman, of how, he was the leader of the order, right? Like he was the most esteemed wizard, and how he succumbed to thinking, to Sauron's delight, that he could be in league with Sauron, that he could be peers with him. And boy, was he wrong. But I think something that stood out to me was how he had this white robe, right, that symbolized his purity, and then it turns into the robe of many colors, to where he really, it's, I don't want to be too on the nose, but right, he's very prideful, and it wears it on his sleeve, and you can just see all the destruction that happens because of his pride, because he thinks that he, eventually he's like, I don't want to be peers with Sauron. Like, I want the ring. Like, I can make Sauron like my prisoner. Like, I can fight fire with fire, basically, and I can win. But there can only be one Lord of the Ring, right? And he does not share power. And I think that's something I've realized, in my pride, when I was wearing the pride on my sleeve, when I was thinking I could use the ring for the good of my people, this power for the good of my life, like Boromir, or just like Gollum, just being hopelessly kind of addicted to this power. I think that there's many stages, and maybe that's kind of the 3 stages. That could be a completely different podcast, but like the pride, maybe you have you're completely, like, the pride would be like Saruman, and the Boromir is just being completely kind of blind to like what's happening, and kind of going on this mission like with this viewpoint that's very black and white, right? And then you've got Gollum, who's just like, I want to just have this pleasure, which is the ring, and like once I have it, I want to hide it away, and I want to be secretive. And I think those are like 3 like really important concepts that maybe we can dive into in a different time.
I lost you for a minute, just so you know.
Okay, Nikki, did you hear me?
Yes, I heard you. I heard you completely.
I'm never going to do a Spaces on my laptop again. I feel like it has something to do with it, but maybe not.
I can tell you from being on a space with Doc, he used his laptop, and we had a lot of glitches.
Yeah,
so
yeah. I thought it would help with audio, but lesson learned. I think I'll just do my iPhone next time and just make sure that I have a good headset on or something. So,
right.
Yeah.
So
my apologies about that.
If I may I speak about my character?
Yes.
That I will be honest with you. Before my conversation, and if I get emotional, I apologize.
No apologies.
I wanted to be Aragorn. I wanted to save the world. I wanted to be that person who rescued and saved everyone. I wanted to be like Frodo. I wanted to have the courage to go in and walk and do, even though I didn't want to. And you can tell in Frodo doesn't want to do this.
Right.
He doesn't have the he really doesn't have the courage even to do it. He is not somebody who wants this thing flung on him, but he's willing to do it because there's nobody else and he has to. So if I have to do it, then I guess I'll do it. I wanted to be that kind of person. I wanted to be Aragorn to, like I said, save the world. And in a discussion I had with Dr. Gregory, I saw that I was actually Eowyn and that I had been chasing after the dream of Aragorn.
Wow. That's pretty deep.
Yeah. Now you understand the little bit of emotion.
Yeah, it's profound.
And here's the thing. I think I'm still in the hospital, in the garden hospital.
Sure.
I haven't found my pheromone yet, but I'm healing, and that is the thing. And I actually am coming alive again. The frozenness that I had and that longing to be the savior, I'm finding out, wait a minute, that's not my purpose. I can't rescue anyone. Until I am whole, I can't do anything in my life until I'm whole. Yes, I may play a part in the battle. And yes, my part in the battle may be something epic, like Eowyn's was. And
I love it. To do something that no other man can do, right?
That no man can do.
Yeah.
Here, that's the kicker. No man can do what I can do.
Yeah.
And back at my life, there has been, and I know this is going to sound wild and woolly, there has been Aragorns in my life that I have been in relationships with. And they have told me, I love you, but I won't. I've had at least 4 men actually ask me to marry them and then come back and tell me after they've asked me, before they've given me a ring, but they've told me they love me and they want to marry me. And then they've 2 or 3 weeks later come back and told me, I love you, but I won't. And it turns out there's another woman in their life. And then they married that woman. And these men have actually come back into my life 10, 15, 20 years later and said, I wish I had married you. And I'm like, dude, you're still married to that woman. Why are you coming back?
Yeah.
And it's been a wild ride. But when Dr. Gregory and I spoke about Eowyn, if you look at Eowyn's life, it was a hard life she lived. She was the one that took care of running the castle. She was the one that took care of the men in her life. She always took care of them. Her brother, her uncles, her cousin, they were the ones she took care of. And she took care of all the other men, making sure food and everything, because she was the one that was going to be left in charge of the people. She was going to become like the queen. When Theoden and them rode off to battle for glory, she was being left behind to take care of the house.
Right.
You know? And for me, something inside of me, I always felt I'm always left behind to take care of the house. I'm always left behind to take care of everybody else. When is it my turn to take care of me and do what I want to do? And that is something that I guess through my own life's journey, I've come to the conclusion, screw Aragorn. I'm sorry to say that. But
screw your Aragorn.
Yeah.
Not my Aragorn. No. I love it.
No. You get what I mean.
Yeah.
I have to do my life and do my thing. And I've come up against a very hard battle and very hard things that no man can understand and no man can slay. I lost the ability to be a mother. I was raped a couple different times. I was molested. And even though men can go through that, when it's a woman, it's such a different experience and
Yeah.
a different thing. So I've had to go up against that black king of Angmar.
Mm.
I've had to go up against him, and I've had to cut him up. I've had to stab him and kill him. And now I see myself moving. Yes, I was brought back, no lie, I was brought back by Aragorn partially, but it wasn't my brother that brought me back. It was my mom who
Mm.
called me the way out.
Mm.
So I'm in the garden of healing, and when Faramir comes, I will be healed and ready for his love.
Wow. Nikki, that was so beautiful. And thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing. I mean, talk about just such a evil thing, an evil entity like the Witch King in your life, and you slaying that. So I just want to say I'm so proud of you, and that really touched me deeply. You are Eowyn, and I love that you're in this garden of healing right now, and I just pray that Faramir comes along for you, because I think he's going to be quite blown away, like Faramir was in the books, because you're an amazing person, and it's been amazing getting to know you uh, really well over some of these spaces, and you've done such a just phenomenal job, co-hosting. I know like my computer has been crazy, but I just want to say I appreciate you so much, and just how much value you add to wherever you're at, and I'm sure that a lot of people would say that know you. So thank you.
Well, I want to give you something funny, and I give this to everyone, okay? Because I had to go through counseling and stuff because I had an anger problem. I don't know why, but I had an anger issue. And my counselor was a pastor in a very large church, and he was I'm only 5'4", and this dude was probably 3 inches shorter than me, if not shorter.
Okay.
But he had the presence of, I used to tease him when he walked down the hallways of the church. It was like um, when Darth Vader walks, dun, dun, dun,
Yeah.
he had that presence about him, and I loved it. And he once told me when I came in my first day of counseling, he looked at me and he said, in churches and stuff, we hug each other. Everybody hugs each other. When you greet each other, you greet each other with a hug. And I went to hug him, and he pulled away from me, crossed his arms, and looked at me and said, "Oh, no, you don't. You're not going to fake loving me. You don't know what love is." And I raged at this man. I went after him. What do you mean I don't? But I went in after he taught me some of the qualities of how to put up the barrier and stuff, and to hold back the sea of anger that would come towards me because of PTSD and stuff. One day I walked into his office and I said, "Pastor, I don't know what to do. I woke up this morning. I've had a great week. I am so enraged." And he goes, "Yay! I'm so glad you came in with your rage today." And I'm like, "What the hell?"
He's like waiting for it.
He was like, "Wait, yes," he was waiting for it. He goes, "I got something for you." And I said, "You're kidding, right?" He's like, "No, we got to go to the kitchen, and then we're going on a hike." And I'm like, "What the hell?" And it came out of my mouth, to this pastor, "What the hell are you up to?" And he's just like, "You'll see." We get to the kitchen. He opens the fridge door, and he's got a dozen eggs in there with his name on it and my name on it. Pulls those eggs out, and he goes, "Follow me." And I'm not lying, I was doing the music for Darth Vader, going dun 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 dun. I'm walking out of the church, and he was like, "You are being a brat today." And I'm like, "I'm telling you, I'm not in the mood for stupid, and I feel like this is going to be stupid." And he's like, "I'm telling you, this is going to help." He took me outside. We walked through the parking lot over to a big, huge forest that's behind the church. Walked into this forest, and he's like, "I've been out here praying, and I found a tree for you." And he opened the eggs and he said, "Here, take an egg, and I want you to aim all of your rage at that egg and throw it at that tree."
Mm.
And I looked at him and I said, "You are the dumbest son of a bitch I've ever met in my life." And he looked at me and started laughing, and he goes, "Who's the one in counseling, little girl?" And I went, "Okay, you win on that. You win."
That's funny.
So I took the egg and I looked at it, and I'm not going to lie to you. The picture of the man who molested me was on that egg. I'm not lying. And I raged through that egg at that tree. And when I heard that crash and that crunch, it was like, oh, yeah, I like this. I grabbed another 10 eggs in. I was laughing my butt off. To learn that sometimes you have to let the rage flow out.
Yeah.
Because I have physical disabilities. They don't like me to go into gyms because I have sores from the top of my head to the soles of my feet. Right now, I look like a polka dotted teddy bear with sores. So they don't like me to go in because they're scared I'm going to give people something, you know? So I stay away from gyms. I walk my parking lot and stuff and do that kind of stuff and do my own little thing. But he gave me an outlet for my rage. And I'm not going to tell you how many eggs after those ones flew from the back porch of my mom's house, because it gave me something physically tangible. And that is the one thing that Eowyn got in her healing. She got something physically tangible to know that she had a reason to live. That is the one cool thing that I can stick with Eowyn and put with Eowyn in her healing. She found the source of where she could get rid of her rage, because she had a lot of it.
Right.
If you read, she was a rager.
Right.
Man, she had no problem.
Ready to go. Ready to rock.
Ready to fight at a certain. I mean, I took on a 6'1" man, and me 5'4", jumped on him, put him on the floor, and was choking him out. At one point, I let him up, and then I put him against the wall and was choking him out again, and had to have one of my friends pick me up, throw me over his shoulder, and carry me away, telling me, "You can't do this." And I'm pulling this guy's underwear and giving him a wedgie while he's pulling off the guy. That's how bad my rage was.
Sure.
So I had my own wars. I had my own battles. But there is a healing. And honestly, I haven't had those rages and stuff, and I haven't had to pull the eggs out in a couple years.
No, it's beautiful.
So, you know, God's done a work in me like he did, you know, like God did in Eowyn.
Right.
So just a little bit of me, just the reason why I was and see myself in Eowyn.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's so beautiful. And I think too, like just hitting on the point, like I think with Eowyn, there's those different stages, right? Where she feels like she's in a cage. Then she gets to go out and prove herself and take down that demon, you know, take down the Witch King. And then what, right? It's going to take a toll on you to do that. You know, it's just an easy thing to do. It's going to take some out of you when you take that demon out, because it takes up a lot of energy. And then it's like, well, what do you do after that? Well, you got to heal. Like you got to heal back up. And I can relate to that a lot too, because I think it's there's been parts of my sobriety, right, where I feel like I conquer, but then there's no healing. Like I'm not looking forward to the next thing. It's kind of like in Inigo Montoya, you know, like in Princess Bride, you know, when he takes out the guy that killed his father. Like that's probably one of the most beautiful parts about his character, is that he's like, well, what am I going to do now? Like, what am I going to do now that I slayed this man that got my revenge? And it's to heal and to find like that renewed purpose, like that renewed role. Because I think there's like pain that happens to us, there's trauma that happens to us in life, and it puts us on that mission to like, you know, get revenge on that trauma or to like to fight it. But then it's like, well, what do you do after that? You know, like, what do you do after that is defeated?
And one of the things that Pastor Bill did teach me that they did in the healing garden, they taught Eowyn. But one of the things that Pastor Bill did teach me is that you can slay your dragon and you can have that dragon completely destroyed. But once that dragon is done, you're going to find a snake pit underneath there. And once you get done killing all those snakes, you're going to find a scorpion pit. And once you're done getting rid of those scorpions, you're going to find cockroaches. And when you're done with the cockroaches, you're going to find more things. You have so many layers of things to go through to heal through that you're always going to be taking care of some kind of something. And that's one of the training things that he taught me. Don't ever stop your healing. Don't ever stop your battles. Always have your battle armor on. Always be prepared to take out what you need to take out, because that is what keeps you strong. And I don't know, maybe I'm a goof troop in that. I don't know, but I've come to see what Pastor Bill said as being necessary for me.
Oh, it's dead on. It's dead on. And I know, I feel like a few people kind of popped off. I feel like X has been really difficult.
It's glitching. It's glitching bad. It's been glitching horribly.
Yeah, so I hope at least the audio carries over, because I'd hope I can use this. And if you're okay, Nikki, you know, putting that on my podcast, because I think everything you said is phenomenal, and I think my audience would really love it. If that's okay.
I'll be honest with you, that's perfectly fine. I've given my testimony in front of thousands of people, so I'm not afraid to tell who I am.
Yeah, great. Well, I appreciate you
Yeah.
sharing that.
It's been it's not I've not had a normal life, Mac.
Yeah, right.
No, it's not been a normal life. It's not been a comfy life. I mean, I don't even know how to tell the story of there's a man who really likes me right now. He likes me. He refuses to give up his girlfriend.
Mm,
And
okay.
it's like, dude, I'm not going to be anybody's side girl. You know,
Right.
if you like me, then you're going to have to move on from her. If she's everything you say she is, then you're the one that has the problem that needs to take care of the situation.
Right.
Heal up and come back to me.
Right.
I can't fix you while you're still in a broken relationship.
Right.
That doesn't work, you know?
I agree.
So there's been some wild things, and we got Dr. Gregory back. Yay!
Yeah, now it's a whole nother story if my request for him to be the co-host will work, because I just feel like those have fallen. Like, there was a point, it was like maybe 30 to 40 minutes into this, where all like that kind of that part that shows if people request to speak, it just like disappeared from my screen. Like, I don't have that right now. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, because I've
Just
been
to be a speaker now. Just be a
okay.
speaker.
Yeah, because I've been inviting you to be a co-host. I've been inviting, like, I've just been trying to do that, and it hasn't been
It's not
working.
even showing up on my phone.
That's so weird. It has to be the laptop. Gosh, I regret that a little bit. But hopefully the audio carries over. And if you're still listening on the podcast, thank you. If you are just picked up this spaces and are like, hey, this is an interesting topic, let me listen, and you're still listening, thank you. That's so cool. We're almost at 3 hours, almost the length, not to be ironic, of a Lord of the Rings movie. So it's like, hey, if you want more Lord of the Rings and you just watch the films and you've read the books, hey, you can listen to this and it will fill that time that you would have been spending watching the movie or reading a few chapters, right?
Oh, exactly. I mean, and that's the thing. When you take the characters and you break it down and you look at them through the eyes of an adult and through the eyes of your own brokenness, we can look at every single character and be one of those characters, but we can also glean from every one of those other characters too in our life.
Right.
And become like Aragorn. We can become like Gimli. We can become like Legolas. I mean, in the books, Legolas is, I don't even know how to put it. He's almost too perfect in some ways.
Yeah, it's like, okay, you can walk on snow. We get it.
We get that you can walk on water, buddy, okay? Mr. Lightfoot, we got it, all right? But then you get to Gimli and you see, and I hate to use this word because he's not, but you see his humanity. You see his dwarf humanity, I guess you would say,
Right.
and stuff. And then you look at Gandalf and you can see that even Gandalf, knowing what's coming, even Gandalf has his moments of questioning. He's not all knowledgeable. He's not all knowing. He has to sit down and remember, because he's got so much knowledge, he's got to sit down and remember what the password is,
Right.
at the gates. So it's kind of cool to look at each character and see yourself in each one too. So anybody listening, look at all the characters and see if you can glean something from each one of them for your life.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's amazing. Well, Nikki, Gregory, I know TD, you're still on here. I think we're coming up on 3 hours, and I don't know about you, but I need to get outside a little bit. I need to breathe some fresh air, so to speak. I need to explore the Shire a little bit on my steed, which is my e-bike. So I think we'll wrap it up. But I just wanted to thank everyone here that is listening. Overall, hopefully this messaging can help you, if you're struggling with something, realize that you can be a hero of your story. You can find inspiration in these characters, and that it's good to have stories like these. It's good to have stories like Lord of the Rings that we can look at and that we can strive towards. Which I think it's a beautiful thing to have this piece of literature, to have like the amazing trilogy. The Hobbit, Rings of Power. I don't know. I don't know about those as much, but I would say the trilogy is like perfect in my opinion. I mean, there's obviously things that are people will nitpick, but I just love the movies. But I think the overall, like if you're still listening, is just overcome your challenges, right? Like overcome whatever that ring is, that thing that's tempting you, that's actually going to make you its slave. Because I think that's a part of addiction. That's a part of bad habits, is they eventually are going to make you their slave. Like that's the whole goal. Like porn is just like, I want you to look at me all the time. Junk food, I want you to eat me all the time. If you're smoking cigarettes or addicted to some kind of drug, I want you to ingest me all the time, because like, hey, like, don't you see like, that it's good for you? Don't you see that you're getting what you want? Don't you see that you're getting the pleasure that you want? And I think it's something to think about, for my listeners on Porn Free Millennial, or just anyone just listening in general. Like if you're struggling with something, to realize that, you're a hobbit, and you can either be like Samwise, Frodo, Pippin, Merry, Rosie, these characters, or you could be Gollum. I was Gollum for a while. I just felt like I was completely possessed by this thing, this entity that I thought was giving me power, and I was wrong. Like it was not. It was actually draining my power, draining my humanity, turning me into something almost unrecognizable, like Gollum was, right? Moving me to a different location. Gollum just goes underneath. He digs too deep, or he goes into the deepest caverns, right? Where hobbits, they live under rocks, but they actually go outside as well. The hobbits, they live underground, but they actually spend most of their time outside. When you think about it, I mean, they're eating a lot, they're cooking a lot, but they're also outside a lot. And I think when you turn into Golem, or like when you're maybe addicted to something, like I was with porn, or if you're addicted to, social media, which I'm always kind of wary about that too in my use here, is just like, I don't want this to become like the ring of power for me. uh you find yourself, when you're in this kind of this trance, that you're inside, you're in the dark. Like literally, like when I used to be addicted to porn, like big time, like you go in the basement, you turn off the lights, you shut the door, you lock the door, you go into private mode, like you do everything you can to like be in the dark, and to have that anonymity, and to just be like in your mind, like the king of the moment, the king of your surroundings. But what do you really what's your kingdom? It's like this desolate like lagoon where you're just like eating fish, and that's like it, and just almost like you're in service to this master that doesn't even care about you. That's not even really like a tangible like person, or it's more of like this entity in your life that you're this master to, and it's not going to serve you. It's only there so that you can serve it, So I wanted to get that message out there, if you're listening, because I think it's an important message to talk about, especially as we just keep moving forward in this age that we're in, this digital age, to where, I mean, just everything is so accessible. Everything is just so like affordable. Like it's like this is all free from, like, you can be on X for free. You can see all these images, some good, some bad. You can go on to many different porn sites for free, right? And now you can access it on X. And so there's an affordability, it's free, accessibility, and now there's anonymity with removing the like having that be private. There's no real accountability there. So that's why I'm a little bit worried. And that's why I want to keep speaking up, because I think it's a big deal. I think it's something that needs to be really thought about, and something that needs to be taken seriously, because I think, like Dr. Bohr said earlier, like you're living these two different lives, when you are in the thralls of porn. Like you're literally, you have like your Hobbit self that you put out to the world. Hey, I'm a Hobbit. But then you put the ring on, and all of a sudden, like, you're in this shadow realm, you're invisible. You succumb, you can succumb, and you're tempted to succumb to the power of the ring, right? And if you do that enough, you end up becoming something that is just unrecognizable. And that's where I saw my life going. That's like where I saw like the path going. If I just kept on this path, like, I'm going to become Gollum. And I, made a decision not to follow that path anymore. And instead of putting the ring on, I put it around my neck and say, I'm going to destroy this son of a gun. So that's what I wanted to end on, at least my message. I didn't know, Nikki, if you had anything else you wanted to add. I'm sending Greg some speaker requests, but I don't know if they're going through.
My only thing that I would end with is that be the hero of your own story and your own life.
Yeah.
You're given a pen to write your story.
Right.
Don't have to erase so much. Don't have to blot a lot out. Write it with ease. Take the higher road. It may be harder. It may be rougher to walk, but take the higher road, and don't go for the ring. Don't look at the ring and lust after the ring like Gollum did. Don't let it overpower you like he did. Be the one who writes your own story and writes it differently like Frodo did. Yes, he could have been overcome by the ring. Have your buddies, have your brothers, have your sisters around you to help you. Don't go alone. Don't walk your path by yourself. You are not strong enough to go on your own. You need to have friends. You need to have family if family is around you. Take strength in that. But write your own hero's story. Write your own epic. Be who you've been called to be in your own story. Don't let somebody write your story for you.
Love it. And Nikki, maybe to end, what character was the one that actually wrote?
That was Sam.
Yeah.
Sam, the rest of the story.
Who started it?
And it was started by Bilbo.
What did Bilbo do with the ring?
Bilbo had to finally give up and give over the mantle to Frodo.
Right.
Because he couldn't carry that mantle any longer. He couldn't carry that ring and hide it any longer. And once he got away from it, he had to stay in a place of healing.
Yeah.
That's one of the things we never touched on. Bilbo got away by giving up freely the ring to Frodo. He released himself from the burden and was able to go to a place of healing and stay in that place of healing for the rest of his life until he was able to go on across the seas.
Right.
And that's beautiful. I mean, that right there is a picture of redemption if I've ever seen a picture of redemption.
Right.
And the beauty of that, and the beauty of Frodo having that friendship with Sam and being able to, at the very end, when he wasn't strong enough, Sam, being the stronger of the two, put him on his back and carried him up to finish the race. And when he wasn't strong enough and Gollum came along, Gollum, in all of his glory and all of his tap dancing, fell off. That's something that is really, to me, very, very indicative of someone who gets what they want and it destroys them.
Mm.
Gollum got what he wanted. In the end, he got the ring, but it destroyed him. It completely consumed him, and he lost his life due to it. That is, any addiction will do that to you. Sooner or later, porn, hey, I'm not low enough, not high enough to say that I've had men want me to watch porn with them and stuff, and it is very powerful and addictive.
Right.
And I have seen it in my own life, even after I've moved away from them, that draw and want to watch it.
Right.
And it's something that I myself have had to battle and say, hey, hell no, get away from me. No, no, no. And it comes to you and creeps to you in the loneliest times of your life when you are by yourself. And that's where Gollum always was.
Mm.
He was by himself.
Isolated.
And the room, but it destroyed him in the end. He did not have a redemption arc. You can't say that Gollum was redeemed because he got his pleasure. He got his pressure, and it destroyed him.
And then somehow inadvertently that like saves everybody.
Exactly. Exactly.
And maybe that speaks to the fact of, I think there is a lot of imagery in like being reborn or almost like dying, like your old self dying. At least that's what I've seen in my life is like I like it seemed like when I was so addicted I got everything I wanted, and then that's like when my life like fell apart, right? And that's like when that self died. And it's really like how do you pick yourself up, and remake yourself into the, at least for me, like my character, like Aragorn, like how do we remake the sword that was broken, all this pain that was caused, how do we reforge that, how do we use that energy for something that's actually positive, something that gives meaning to our lives, something that is there to actually strike fear into the enemy, strike fear into whatever could have consumed you or wants to consume you, putting it on its heels to where you're moving forward, you're bringing the fight to it, and you're going to cut its head off, like you're going to take it out, like you said with your character Eowyn, like just taking it to the Witch King and just saying, you're done, like you're going down, bud. I absolutely love that. That's such an inspiring thing. I'll try one more time. If anyone wants to speak, you can request, and then we'll wrap it up. But I'm hosting right now on my laptop, and the only speaker I see right now is Nikki. I don't see any requests, which is a little upsetting to me. I'm going to send out speaker invites one more time to everybody in here, and if you get it, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. If you didn't get it, give me a thumbs down. That'll kind of give me a good idea. And I don't even know if I can see your thumbs up or thumbs down, honestly. I think part of it is if you're hosting from a laptop and people are on phones. I think that's where the issue is. Maybe I'm just being too simple, but I kind of feel like that's a part of the issue going on right now. I'm going to try like one last ditch effort. Nikki, do you know, like if I try to switch to my phone, is that going to cause any issues with the space?
What it's going to do is you're going to have to collapse the space. So you would have to end the space probably.
Oh, and then you'd have to remake it.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
Remake the space. Yeah. So.
But I just wanted to tell everyone this. Thank you so much, Nikki. Thank you for sharing what you had to share. Like, that was to me just such a cool moment, and maybe indicative of the podcast. Like, really, I kind of initially had like this conversation of Dr. Boris and I to talk, and then you hopped in with all your knowledge and bravery and courage, like Aowen, which is so cool. Like, it's just indicative of like how we can all work together to have a unified message of encouragement, a unified message of striving towards something that's higher than ourselves, an ideal, a character potentially, right, from Lord of the Rings that we really that we can really connect with, that we really look up to, that we want to emulate. And it's so cool that you were able to share that, and I really appreciate what you had to share, what Dr. Boris had to share today, and some of the other guests. It was phenomenal.
And I can tell you right now, Dr. Boris is champing at the bit.
I know.
He's frustrated.
I
know
know.
he is. I love him so much. And Gregory, I want to thank you so much for your inspiration to me.
I love that. Okay, so maybe what we'll do, and I don't know if you're up for it, but we could potentially just try restarting or creating a new one, and then maybe that could be, if we talk long enough, or if you guys have enough energy, that could be something, maybe a part 2 or something. Nikki, what do you think? Are you down to talk some more about it and kind of put some hope out there that we can resurrect the space, or would you want to just kind of end it?
If we can end it now, because I have something that I have to do.
Totally.
So I have another friend that I have to go into their space.
No problem. You've been so awesome. And we went on for 3 hours, which is so cool. The length of a Lord of the Rings film, again, for all you Lord of the Rings nerds, listen to it from the beginning if you didn't start at the beginning. Just want to say, L Homemaker, thanks for being on. Really appreciate you showing up. TD is a great follow, and I really just appreciate you and your support. And then Heistman, make sure you give Heistman a follow as well. And again, my apologies, guys, if you put in like a request to speak. I don't see anything on my laptop, and I was kind of debating whether or not to end the space and try it again. But I am going to post this on my podcast, which is Porn Free Millennial. You can find it on Apple or Spotify. And then I'll post it on my Substack and Medium as well, which are publications where I typically write like 2 to 3 times a week on those. And you can get emails if you subscribe for free there. And I just try to kind of take a different look at porn through my experience, through my lens, and just try to be a little bit more creative about it. Less like scientific and like black and white, but more of like, hey, like I'm going through this now. I'm going through recovery. Here's my perspective on things. Here's where I think, this might make you think a little bit differently about it. Because it definitely ruined my life for a bit, and it would have if I let it, kind of talking about The Ring. But I just wanted to thank everyone for being on. Nikki, Dr. Boris, again, thank you so much. And then just for all the listeners, really appreciate you guys. I would just say, final words is just like Nikki said, hey, you've got the pen, you've got the ink. The ink is wet on the pen. You have the book. There's an empty page. Write it. Write your story. Stop letting other people write your story. You're the author of your story, and you're a hero. And it's okay to be a hobbit too. You can be a hobbit and a hero at the same time. So much love to everybody, and keep fighting the good fight. Thank you, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye now.